What is going on, IB Nation? Welcome to another edition of Upon Further Review. It's an Irish Breakdown podcast. That's Brian. I'm Vince, and this is our fourth to last Upon Further Review. I think.
Fourth to last. You got three more.
Yep. So looking forward to that, obviously. But no, it's a little IB After Dark. It's a Sunday evening. This is what we do on Sunday evenings, everybody, and it's really funny because every Sunday I'm like, yeah, I got the show at 7 o'clock, and my wife's like, what show? Okay, let's have this conversation again. Every Sunday, 7.
We're now in year 3 or 4 of doing this.
It's it wouldn't be it wouldn't be a Sunday without that conversation. But before we jump into this, Brian, I do want to give a shout out. You have your traditions.
She has hers.
I know, right? I want to give a shout out to Sean at Costco. Okay, Sean, he watches the show. I was wearing this sweatshirt today out, doing some shopping, and he stopped me, says he loved the show, and then the reason he's getting the shout out is because I was looking for a certain something and it wasn't out. He went into the back. He found it for me, saved Christmas. So Sean from Costco, appreciate you very much, my man. You helped me out. You saved me big time. So, I mean, I had the picture for my wife. She's like, I want this. And I'm like, you need to find this. And he came back, man. So Sean from Costco, you the man. So,
I also want to thank everybody that was at the tailgate. I met so many people on the tailgate. We talked a little bit about it on Friday night, but I got a chance to talk with my parents. I know how my interactions were, and they were amazing. They were awesome. I didn't have a minute to breathe. I didn't eat any food during the tailgate because I just was nonstop talking to people, and it was just so amazing to meet so many great people. We had Jadon Blair and his dad came by for a while. But the bigger thing for me is talking to my parents. You all were so amazingly gracious and kind to my family, and that means more to me than how you treat me. And so I want to thank y'all for that. All the food was gone. Y'all could have left me like just a little something, but my mom was very happy that all the food got eaten. So appreciate y'all for that. But it was amazing. It was the most packed tailgate we've ever had. I was shocked. I'm thinking Friday night.
Well, yeah,
no, it's and it got going pretty quick, Vince. So many of you out there. Also wanted to give a little bit of a prayer shout out to our guy Larry, who came to the tailgate in the game despite the fact his mom passing away the day before, and he said, it was talking to him, and and what they're going through, and I was like, I got some guys on my team that know what that's like, buddy. With you and Sean and Ryan have all lost a parent. Mm-hmm. Trevor and I have both lost a grandparent in the last year. So, Larry, we're thinking about you and we're praying for you. And it was great meeting you and your son on Saturday or Friday night as well. So, but yeah, it was just a tremendous experience, and just so many of y'all came out. Got to meet a lot of new faces. There were some ones we've met before. Coach Bent was there, so it was good chance to talk to him. So it was awesome, and of course the game was great. And Vince and I both dove into the film. We've talked. Yeah, there's a lot to discuss. We're gonna break it down now, and then we're gonna put a little bow on it. And at the end of the show, we're gonna talk about the whole first round.
Yes.
Just going to give our initial thoughts, and I'm going to be throwing some shade at the SEC.
No.
So, yeah, it's going to happen. I know it's shocked. It's going to happen. But I also want to have a legit conversation about this narrative about strength of schedule and all this other kind of stuff, and just the nonsense that we saw come out this weekend. So, so I'm ready. Let's get rocking and rolling, man.
Hey, I'm just happy the game we cover was on Friday night. I originally was like, oh, come on, Friday night. But it was perfect because we got to do our thing on Friday, get all excited, pumped up, like ready to go. Like I wouldn't have been able to focus on any kind of football on Saturday if Notre Dame was on Saturday. You know what I mean? And so it was nice to just do our thing on Friday, be excited and be happy for the outcome, and then just watch more college football on Saturday. Yep. Like it was the perfect setup as far as I'm concerned. So I hope Notre Dame gets the Friday night game every year at this point. But we'll cross that bridge when we come.
And I am a little under the weather, so I'm hoping my voice lasts.
Yeah,
we shall see.
Yeah, but we got a lot to talk about. So, but no. Hey, first segment, we kind of want to jump into our overall thoughts on this game as we watched it back, and I think as always, certain opinions that we had while watching the game live kind of get heightened, and then certain things that we may not have seen, on a live watch come to light, I guess is the best way to put it. And in the moment, for example, you tweeted. No, you didn't tweet this out. You put it on the board, I think. We didn't know that Rocco Spindler got hurt. right? We didn't realize that or why he was in street clothes, in the second half. But then when you go back, and you watch the film, you kind of see where it happened, and then it kind of explains the way some of the things went down towards the end of the first half as well. And so, Brian, I'm going to kick it over to you, but your first overall thoughts as you watch the film back and things that maybe, like I said, got even more heightened because of what we saw and what the film, or things that stood out to you that you may have missed the first time around.
Obviously we'll get into the offense specifically and defense specifically. You hope to hear that the news coming back about Rocco Spindler and Riley Mills is positive, right? I mean, saw a video of Bryce Young dancing after the game. He's fine. He just got kneed to the head.
He got his bell rung.
At that point in time of the game, there's no need to put him back in. Yep. He looked fine on the sidelines. He was dancing after the game. Don't want to even speculate about Rocco and Riley. We'll just see. Coach Freeman's going to talk about it tomorrow. You all know I don't like to get into the whole injury speculation thing for a million reasons, because there's a lot of people like Jeremiah Love's probably not going to play, may not play, blah, 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 blah. A lot of that speculation going around, and turns out he wasn't fine, like he was 100% no problem, but he was clearly good enough to run for 98 yards.
Right.
So, so we won't get into that, but obviously that's the one thing that kind of the one dark cloud that lingers over it is those two key injuries, and those guys are both very important for Notre Dame. So we'll find out about that. But just big picture, Vince, when you watch this game, you could see a lot of rust on offense in this game. But I was surprised at how ready the defense was for this game, and we'll dive into more specifics. But I knew that Notre Dame had an athleticism advantage over Indiana. I was surprised how much it was. And there were several plays where I actually think I might put this into the run game. So I'm going to do some breakdowns of the offense and a little bit of the defense over these next couple of days, all 22. That's going to go on the premium board. But I'm going to put a play in there of the Indiana-Ohio State game. It was like a 3 or 4 yard gain for Ohio State, and it was almost like similar type of path that opened up, but actually maybe slightly smaller hole for Jeremiah Love that Ohio State had against Indiana. And the running back just kind of didn't have the juice, because it wasn't Travion, didn't have the juice to hit it. And I said last week, hey, look, this is the kind of thing Notre Dame can hit, but that's what it was. They just weren't prepared for the speed. Vince, we were outside when Jadarian broke that 20-yard run, and you were just like, that's what happens every single week. That safety thought he had the angle. That safety has been a good tackler all season long.
Yep.
And he just couldn't get to Jadarian. And it was the same thing with Jeremiah. And then the other side of the ball, there were several times you think that a team's about to get, you think maybe Indiana's a shot to getting into the corner, and then just out of nowhere somebody gets to the ball.
Right.
They're running inside zone, and the running back cuts back, and a Don Schuler goes from 12 yards deep to the line of scrimmage like that and just drills the guy. And Marcus Freeman starts going nuts. I mean, it just was they did it, and you could see Angela has so Angela takes, I think she took like 4,500 photos from the game. I mean, just so a lot of them will like be in sequence. She just loads them all up, and they'll be in sequence. And there's a sequence of her taking video of the team before they run out of the tunnel. And you could see Marcus Freeman pacing back and forth just the whole time talking. And you could see, like, it's not like, oh, I'm nervous. It's like, it's like a team captain right in front of his boys getting them hyped up. And you can see the players just going like this, and then you could just see them kind of getting more and more amped up. This team was so ready to play in this game. And I think they fed off of the crowd. And that was a big part of it as well. But this team overall, Vince, was very ready to play this game. And the more you go back and look at it, the more you watch, you realize that the moment was not they have to adjust to the moment. There was none of that for Notre Dame. There was some of that for Indiana. There was none of that for Notre Dame. And, I think that was probably my best big picture takeaway is that now, again, there's this thing going around taking a shot at Brian Kelly, like Notre Dame has scored more points as many points in the college football playoff in one game as Brian Kelly scored in like his 3 playoff games. Right. So it was like, or 10 more. It's like he scored 3 against Clemson and 14 against Bama. And I'm like, okay, yeah, we get it. Like there's shade of Brian Kelly. Indiana's not Bama or
Correct.
Clemson from 2020 or 2018 either.
2018, yeah.
And so like let's like pump the brakes on that. We can have that conversation on January 1st when we watch them play Georgia if Notre Dame plays well. But the point, however, is this team came out in this moment with what was on the line. So the opponent wasn't what those teams were, but the moment was every bit as big.
Mm-hmm.
And this team came out with a much different mindset and a much different attitude. And it made me think, Vince, we had two people, Griff Weidler, and then there was one other fella. I think his name was Larry. I think it was another fella named Larry also that was there. And they both were people who watched the first live show we ever did, which was the post game of the Rose Bowl in 2020 when Notre Dame lost to Bama. And you start thinking about that game, you start thinking of 2018, you start thinking about this game, and you just remember how tight Notre Dame was coming out of both of those games. You remember how tight Notre Dame was coming out against Alabama in 2012, to where, heads down, just like really looking focused, but you're just not sure if they're focused or if they're just kind of like, are they overwhelmed? Are they're a little puckered up on the backside? You know what I mean? Like, and they played in each of those games like a team that was a little bit kind of puckered up in the backside. And this team came out playing loose. This team came out with energy. They were hopping around. They were bouncing around. They were fired up. They were locked in pregame, Vince, watching the quarterback throw around. They were locked and loaded in pregame, watching Riley throw the ball around, watching Steve throw the ball around, Kenny and CJ throw the ball around. These were guys that were coming out there ready to play, locked in, loose. And it wasn't, you find out, is this real enthusiasm or fake enthusiasm? And you found out right away when the game started that it was real enthusiasm, because they flew around on both sides of the ball. One side executed better than the other, Vince.
Sure.
Defense executed better than the offense, but the energy was there in all phases of the game, and it just kept building and building. And I think that was the most encouraging thing. Now we need to see if they can continue it away from home and down in New Orleans and 10 days or whatever. But for this first round game, that was something that you saw, Vince. And when you dive into the film, you could see it in that first couple series on both sides of the ball that they were amped. There was no hesitation. We talked about the defense has been kind of slow starters,
right,
for the last couple months of the season. Not in this game,
right?
Dude, they were boom, boom, boom.
Yeah,
they were on the attack.
We'll get to that. Don't worry. Yeah,
they were on the attack from the minute the game started till they kind of called the dogs off with 5 minutes left. That was the biggest thing to kind of take away from me, Vince.
Yeah, I mean, this game was massive in whatever context that you want to use. This game was massive, right? And Notre Dame, like, I could have seen past Notre Dame teams come out in this moment at home with everything that was riding on this game. First one ever, you're the only game in town. It's prime time. It's all of those things, right? There was every excuse in the world to come out and be like, ooh, we can't make a mistake. We have to be perfect. We have to do this. We have to do that. And that was not the case. And I completely agree with you when you watch the film back and you're just talking, from a football standpoint, defense was loose. They were loose. They were just firing on, all cylinders. They were, firing out of their stance. They were coming downhill. They were making tackles, making stops. I mean, they were playing great team defense, and the athleticism then took over. And then offensively, yes, there were mistakes, and we'll talk about those, no doubt, but they were also not daunted by the moment. They're, third down conversions. Like, that's the time when you kind of pucker up, right? Like, you got to be perfect. That was not the case. You know what I mean? They had one of their best third down conversion games of the year, in this moment. And I think that can't be forgotten. Like, it's one thing to do well on third down in a game in the regular season, against a, and I'm just picking a game out of random here, right? Like against a Virginia in the middle of the season. Okay. This was a college football playoff game, and they had one of their better third down conversion rates of the season. You know what I mean? And they were converting on fourth down, and they were doing things that good quality teams do in big moments. And I think that's what had been missing from Notre Dame, since I've been following the team. The big moments, right? They got to be perfect. And part of that was preached to them by the last coaching staff There's no doubt about it. And that's why they were like that, right? You listen to Marcus Freeman, and I'll put a plug in here for the Peacock documentary thing, right? I started watching the next 2 episodes today. I haven't finished it, but the message is still the same. It's all the time about team success. And yes, there's cliches and stuff in there, and I get it, but the team. And then it's, if you are part of the team and you do what the team does, then you can get your individual success. They're bought in completely to that message because the message never changes. And that's a big thing, right? You can say it's cliche all you want, but when it's the same message being delivered to you, and it's also the same message that he adopts for himself, okay? I think that's also very key, because when he was asked about the Bears and he was asked about Ohio State and all, it's the same message. Team glory comes individual glory. Like, it's the same message, and kids see that, man. They see that, and they see that he's completely bought in. So I know I'm kind of going off on a tangent here, but it goes back to the bigger picture of this team was ready to play. There is no moment, in my opinion, up to this point that has been too big for this team, for this head coach, right?
What was the biggest mistake they made this season? It was not viewing a moment as big enough.
Yeah.
The Northern Illinois game.
Right.
It was not properly viewing the magnitude of that game and kind of just nonchalantly coming into that game.
As soon as that game was over, that narrative now changed, because every game from that point forward was an elimination game, and they treated it like that. And that's where this team is right now.
Now we have to learn moving forward, and this is the last moving forward thing I'm going to say in this show. The rest of it's going to be focused on this game and this team.
Yeah.
Now the key is what Marcus Freeman said the downfall of this team was against Northern Illinois was the team did not know how to handle success. This team has shown they can handle adversity. Now this team has to show that they can handle success.
That's fair.
And now that you have that first playoff win, that monkey off your back, is it okay? We've done something, we've arrived, or is it, fellas, this is just step one or step two? I mean, step one is getting here. Step two is winning that first game. Now it's okay. Now you got to do something different. And that's what we're going to find that this team can do. But in this particular moment, Vince, as you said, they were ready. They were loose, and they played. I mean, I don't even want to say they played with the same energy they did in the regular season, because they didn't. Right? I mean, that, like, you talk about, like, playoff, football is a different animal, and not everybody can handle that. Tennessee couldn't handle that. SMU couldn't handle that.
No.
And I'll give – and what's the one opponent that handled the moment the best? What was the one team that lost in the first round who handled the moment the best, that was not overwhelmed by it was Clemson, who's been here before.
Exactly.
Right? Like, it's the one team that lost that handled it. And so that's what the teams that won. It's like the moment wasn't too big for them. They were able to raise their level of play to that. Okay, this is what it took to get here. Now we got to get up here. And for this first game, Notre Dame did that. And that's important. Now it's about building on it. But for this game, it's why, you got a head coach that's been coaching for a long time in Curt Cignetti, who's a very successful coach. He's coached in national championship games at the FCS level. He's coached in playoff games at the Division II level. He's been an assistant coach at Alabama in a year where they won a national championship.
Right.
And the coach on the Notre Dame sideline let it all out, let it all hang out, right? Kicking a 49-yard field goal at the end of the half, running a reverse to start the second half in a game that was still competitive-ish. You know what I mean? His team came out aggressively, and the other team played conservatively. Let's try to prepare for that initial moment, and it was the brash, talkative, trash talking. We beat the S out of ranked teams. It was that guy whose team played a little puckered, and it was the 38-year-old. He's learning on the job. He shouldn't. There's a lot of Notre Dame fans. He didn't believe he didn't deserve this and all this other kind of stuff. And how's he going to be? His team is the one that came out loose and saying, hey, we belong here, and we're going to show everybody that that's the case. And by the way, Vince, Angela just texted me. She's listening to our intro. She's changed her mind. She wants to go now. So it's not happening. It's not happening, but yeah.
That's great. That's fantastic. But look, that's going to do it for our overall look at look back on the game. We're going to get into offense and defense here in just a second, but before we do, make sure you hit that like button, that subscribe button, that notification bell. Share with your family and friends, and of course, give us a 5-star review. Jump on the boards at irishbreakdown.com. Brian talked about some of the stuff that's going to go up on the boards, a lot of all 22 film, stuff like that. So make sure that you check that out and get on over there. But it's a great Christmas gift, by the way, if you're still looking for that last minute Christmas gift. I'm just saying, the Notre Dame fan in your life, make sure you get them a subscription to the boards. All right, Brian. So let's jump into the keys to victory revisited for the offense, and got a lot of good stuff here. And of course, if anybody follows what we do here on Upon Further Review and your keys to victory in general, everybody knows what the first key to victory on offense is, and it is start fast. So what are your thoughts on whether they started fast or not? Because they did go, they threw the pick.
2 and out. Well, that's
2 and, yeah.
I'm going to give it a check.
Okay.
Surprisingly.
Right.
Because obviously, I mean, you threw a pick on your first possession.
Right.
Turn the ball over in your first
second
possession.
play. Right.
And that's obviously a huge no-no. Huge no-no. But your defense bailed you out, right? Your defense made the stop, got you the ball back, and you're backed up. And what do you do on your first play after throwing a pick? You go 98 yards.
Right. What
do you do in your next possession? You go down the field and get another touchdown, take 9 minutes off of the clock. You're now middle of the second quarter, and you're up 14-0.
Right. And felt like the game was kind of in the bag at that point with the way the defense was playing.
You had another punt. They went down after your punt and kicked a field goal to make it 14-3, and then you come back, get a field goal of your own. Mm-hmm. I mean, so you scored on 3 of your 5 first half possessions and took a 2-touchdown lead into halftime, with which, the way, as you said, Vince, the way your defense was playing, mm-hmm. it was kind of all she wrote.
Right.
So I would have to say, yeah, it was a good start. You shook off the interception, because like one of the I did the overall keys to victory, Vince, and mm-hmm. and we're not going to talk about those here because then the show would get really long. But it was like, field position, win the turnover battle,
sure,
and then the other one was handle adversity. The third one is you're gonna have to respond to adversity, and right out of the gate, both sides of the ball were faced with adversity.
Yeah,
the defense was faced with adversity first because of the offensive turnover, right? Your offense isn't adversity turning the ball over yet because you're now off the field. Your defense is now faced with adversity because of your mistake. And the defense responded great, right? Make the interception. So now you're backed up at your own 2. Now you're facing adversity.
Mm-hmm.
Because one of the things that was in my keys to victory was like, you got to win the field position battle, right? Like that's going to be a big part of it. And so what does the offense do? You just turn the ball over. You're backed up at your own 2. That's some adversity you faced, and then boom, you go 98 for a touchdown on an incredibly well-blocked play. And, of course, then Jeremiah Love does Jeremiah Love things. So that, to me, and then your next possession was the second and third drives were the exact opposite drives.
Mm-hmm.
Like they could not be more polar opposite. One of them was one play
for 14 seconds.
Yards.
14-second drive. Yeah.
The next one was was it 16 plays?
83 yards, 9 minutes and 8 seconds.
9 minutes off the clock.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Right? So that level of bouncing back from adversity, and then, of course, after the turnover, you scored on 3 of your next 4 possessions, 3 of your first 5 overall. In a playoff game, you had more points at halftime than Indiana was giving up on the season in their season average. Was it great? No, that's why they didn't get a plus. But it gives me a check. They accomplished what they needed to do. Your defense was, because what's part of the start fast? It's either keep up with the other team if they're doing it, get your crowd involved, take their crowd out, getting confidence. There's all these different things. Help your defense out. If your defense is playing well, then you jump yourself out to a big lead. And the defense was playing great early, and the offense said, hey, you had us, now we got you. And the defense was able to be pretty fresh the rest of the game too, because they were able to sit on the sideline for about 20 minutes of real time.
Yeah.
Like real time. So it was 9 minutes off the clock, but it was about 20 minutes of like real life time where they were over on the sideline making adjustments and getting rest. And so, yeah, I give him a check, Vince. I'm curious if you do the same, or if you'd kind of give a minus. Was the turnover that crucial for you? But for me, I'm giving him a check. Yes, you got to avoid that turnover, but I love the way that they bounced back from that turnover, back-to-back scoring drives. And they weren't short drives, as you mentioned. The one was, what, 85?
83.
83?
Yeah.
They weren't short drives. They weren't like the Louisville game where, your two of your first three scores are on a 9 and a 50-yard field.
98 and 83. I mean, you're starting out in the minus red zone both times, right? I mean, those are great drives. There's no doubt about it. And I don't care that the one drive was only one play. It's still a 98-yard drive, right? And I agree. I think I would give it a check if it wasn't for the stupid pick. And yes, I realize it was a tip ball and all of that, but
he shouldn't have thrown it.
He shouldn't have thrown it.
He shouldn't have thrown that ball through that guy. You got to have some awareness of how that guy's playing.
There were multiple defensive linemen within the eyesight of that throw. You can't throw that ball.
And he had a window to lead Eli Raridan inside,
correct,
as well.
So you can't make that throw. So that's a mistake. I mean, it's a mistake, right? And so, when that happened, you and I were standing out there. I was like, oh crap, great, here we go. You know what I mean? And they responded quickly, right? The defense responded quickly, and then the offense kind of took over from there. And that's the fast response, that part. And it was how they responded. Everything you just said. Like, I don't want to rehash what you just said, but you're absolutely spot on. I mean, they could have kind of gone into the tank, and they could have just tried to run the ball up the middle a few times and like, okay, now we can't make a mistake, that kind of a deal. And they didn't do that. You know what I mean? It was that 16-play drive was just a methodic, push the ball down the field. There were good plays on third down. I talked about that in the open, about how good Notre Dame was on third down. They were really good on third down on that drive specifically. And they just kept the chains moving, right? Now, later on, they started pushing the ball down the field a little bit more, but that was more about what Notre Dame was doing to them as opposed to what Notre Dame needed to do the other direction. So they took what IU was giving them and then also were imposing their will in the trenches, which I liked on those first two drives. And so that's why I agree with you on the fast start. They score on 3 of the first 5 drives. Like, if you'd have told me that going in, I've been like, yeah, Notre Dame's going to win. Like that. Yeah. I'm good with that. Like, they had 5 drives in the first half. They scored on 3 of them. That's a Notre Dame win because of what I anticipate is going to happen defensively. So I'm happy with that. They weren't trailing or anything at halftime. Like, they started fast enough. They got control of that game. That's the biggest part to me. Those 2 touchdowns gave them control of the game. And then you take into effect what the defense was doing. Boom, check.
Vince, to your point, I want to put some data to the point that you just made about on that drive, that third down drive, and add something to that, because third down has not been a strength for Notre Dame this season. We've talked about that.
Yep.
Notre Dame came into the game, I think, ranked in the 80s in third downs. I mean, they ranked 87th in third down offense. Indiana ranked 8th in third down defense. Indiana had not allowed a single opponent to go over 44%, to even get to 44% on third downs. Like, think about that. Like, this isn't a game. Like, remember a couple of years ago when Notre Dame had a good third down defense rankings wise, but they had like 2 games. I think they had like 2 games where they just like dominated somebody, and like they went 0 for on third down. And you're like, yeah, they're a good third down defense, but they're maybe not as good as their third down ranking looks, because they held UNLV to 0 for 12. Remember that? And you kind of looked at it and like, they were okay on third down, but Ohio State was over 50% and USC was 67%. And, North Carolina had some third down success. Stanford had some third down success against them. BC had some third down success against them in the second at times. And that's not the case for Indiana. This Indiana team, Vince, literally did not, the highest third down opponent percentage that they gave up all year was against Nebraska, who they beat 56-7. They had 43.8%. And if you go back and watch the game, a lot of that was on the second team defense. Notre Dame went 58.3. In the first half, they were 5 of 7.
Right.
They went 3 for 3 on the drive that you're talking about. And you had Bo Collins caught a ball, made a guy miss, got upfield for a first down. On a 3rd and 6. So that's a 3rd and kind of the end of the meet. I mean, you're a yard away from so as coaches, we have sort of the 3rd and short, which is like 3rd and 1 to 2. You're 1 to 3. Then there's third and medium, which is like third and 4 to 6. And then third and long is like 7 and longer. And then third and extra long is like beyond
Plus,
10, right?
Yeah, right.
You're a yard away from it being third and long.
Mm-hmm.
You convert that one. And then after that, Vince, you got into a couple third and shorts. And you had a 3rd and 2 where Aeneas Williams can move the chains. You get into a 3rd and 1. Riley Leonard moves the chains. So you went 3 for 3 on that 16-play drive on third down against a team who was one of the best in the country at stopping teams from having third down success. And I think that's something that big time factors into my decision. I mean, to my grade, Vince, I mean, you look at it, let's see, Purdue, Washington, UCLA, Western Illinois, all were held to 3 or fewer first downs for the entire game. And Notre Dame had that on that one drive. They had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 of their 12 regular season opponents had 5 or fewer third down conversions for the entire game. Nebraska, a team they beat by 49, is the only one that had more than 5. And as I said, that all came in garbage time.
Right.
Notre Dame had 5 by halftime
Mm-hmm.
of that game. And I think that adds into the whole why I'm giving them a plus for the fast start, because they had to do it doing things that went right at Indiana and what Indiana does best. They had already doubled up Indiana's rushing yards allowed by the end of the third drive. Now, again, you were aided by a 98-yard strike, but that's part of it.
Other teams could bust off long plays too against IU, and it still affects their average.
Exactly. But even on that third drive, Jadarian Price goes for 4. Aeneas goes for 6. Jadarian busts a 20-yard run. Riley converts a third down with a 4-yard gain. I mean, you were getting some push going on that drive as well, Vince.
Yep.
On the run game.
Right.
I mean, Aeneas had over 20 yards on that drive alone. Actually had 29 yards on that drive alone. And so that was the thing for me is you did it, and you did it going right at him, which I'll talk a little bit more on some of these next keys. But I think that, and that also too, the way the crowd was, the way that whole thing went down with the interception and then the 98-yard run, like your start had that crowd just eating from the palm of your hand for the rest of the game.
Correct.
I mean, it did play a huge role in the crowd. I mean, because the crowd was, Vince, you and I were out there for a long time. I mean, we experienced it, and that's partly why we're out there, is because we want, what's the crowd like? How do they handle this? It helps us evaluate kind of how things are going. And I mean, they got that crowd going, and they just never stopped. And that's part of it too. And you said to me, I think it was you said this to me before the show started, you felt that Indiana had a hard time dealing with that. Or maybe it was somebody else I was talking to, had a hard time dealing with that. You could tell, even though they played in a 100,000+ seat stadium in Columbus, there's just a different environment about a night playoff game in South Bend, Indiana, than a noon kickoff game in Columbus, Ohio. And they had a hard time, I felt, with that moment. Yeah. At that point in time. But a lot of it is because of how Notre Dame started, just going right at them.
Yep.
It's like, you said this, Vince, when you're good at something and somebody beats you early in a game at what you're good at, that gets in your head. I mean, that can really get in your head. And that's exactly what Notre Dame did to Indiana on Friday night.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. Let's jump into the second key to victory, Brian, and that was to, I believe it was, I look it up because I want to make sure. Yes, establish the line of scrimmage. And this is an interesting one because there were times where Notre Dame was dominant on the line of scrimmage offensively. And then there were times where they, IU did some things to the offensive line that they're going to need to clean up before the next game. So your thoughts on that second key?
I give it a check, Vince, because of the first half. I think Notre Dame controlled the line of scrimmage in the first half. And I know you'll have something to talk about when that moment changed after I'm done with this. So I'll let you handle that one.
Yep.
But I thought second half, not so much. I don't think that they really, in the second half, they weren't as good up front. The pass protection started to break down a little bit. There were a lot more miscues in the run game in the second half. Notre Dame didn't run the ball overly effectively in the second half. Part of that is what you're going to talk about. Part of that is, Jeremiah Love was, kind of, they were pulling back on him a little bit, you could tell. And part of it was Indiana was like, we got to go at them. They started doing a lot more run stunts. They started bringing they were much more aggressive with their secondary, because early in the game, Indiana came out. You and I were talking about this. You talked about this on Friday night, Vince. And as we watched the film, I think a lot of it had to do with Indiana played their safeties off. And I think there was two reasons for that. One was obviously protect against some of the deep shots, because I think Trevor said this in the postgame show. He thought, and I think it's a great observation, that Indiana assumed that Notre Dame was going to try to reverse engineer the offense because of how good they are in the run game. Because that's what Notre Dame did to Army. That's what Notre Dame did to some of these other teams that had really good run defenses. Notre Dame would come out and do some things to try to loosen them up a little bit with the throwing game. Yep. Remember against Stanford, I think Notre Dame threw on like the first 5 plays of that game, and Stanford had a pretty decent run game coming into that game. Against Army, they ran the ball the first couple times, but then they had the play action touchdown pass to Jordan Faison to get them on the board. So I think they were playing for that a little bit. But I think the other reason why is because they wanted to make sure their safeties had more depth to get to the running backs in case they got free. Because I think Indiana felt that they could beat Notre Dame's run game the same way they had beaten everybody else's run game, with their box and then triggering a guy here, triggering a guy there from all over. And they could bait Notre Dame into some of the things they had baited other people into. And they weren't able to do that because early on Notre Dame established the line of scrimmage. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of where I look at it, Vince, and say, even though it didn't last for 4 quarters, it was something where, because they established it early, that allowed Notre Dame to jump out, get that lead, and put them behind the 8 ball. This is not a defense you want to play catch up against, especially if you're Indiana. And so I give them a check for that. If I'd have given them a plus if they would have done in the second half what they did in the first half.
Yeah, I mean, 155 yards on the ground in the first half, and they had like 18 or something. Like it was some very low number. What was it? I had it right here. 38. Excuse me. Had 38 yards in the second half on the ground. I mean, to your point, right? And what you wanted me to talk about, and we were talking about this before the show started, and we're talking about Rocco Spindler, right? And what an asset that he was since he's been in the lineup, for the Irish, and what happened when he left the lineup. And it's not just that when he left the lineup, it was when he got injured. So, you went back and you were watching the film just like I was, and you found the spot where he got injured. And it was in the third drive, the very end of the third drive of the first half, I believe, right?
It was the play where Pat Coogan snapped the ball too early, and the entire line didn't get off because he snapped too early. It was, I think, 2 plays or a play before. I think it was a play before the touchdown pass to Jaden Thomas.
Okay.
So he snapped the ball early, and then that caused they all kind of fell on themselves, and then somebody fell on Rocco.
Gotcha.
So it was the end of that drive. And then the next drive they came out, he had his right ankle foot. I don't know if it was an ankle or a foot, but his whole right ankle all the way down his foot, heavily taped.
Yeah.
Like very heavily taped. And you could tell he was not moving as well as he had been early. Yeah.
And at that point, that is where the offensive line kind of took a bit of a step back, because he wasn't able to plant on that foot. And that's eventually why they decided at halftime to sit him down and bring in Sam Pendleton. And that's why he was in street clothes at halftime. And so I think
he couldn't get any push off that right foot.
And if you can't get push, you're not going to be an effective offensive lineman. And they knew that. I mean, look,
and
they also had the game in
like
control
that, Vince,
too.
20 minutes in the locker room.
Yeah.
And
true.
that kind of cold night, it wasn't going to get any better.
Right. And the game was at a point, like, I'm not saying it was in the bag or anything like that, but I do feel like not only Rocco's injury, but a couple of the other injuries that took place, when they happened, it was like, you know what? We like where the game is at right now. There's no need to push and make it worse at that point. And I do think that was part. I mean, don't you think that was part of the decision-making process at halftime? Part of it. I'm not saying he wasn't injured, because he was.
Yeah, I mean,
but I think that was part of it.
Do they give him a shot at halftime? If it's a 17-17 game, or if it's a 17-14 game? I don't know. Maybe. Yeah. I don't know. Right. But the fact is because you got off to a fast start, you didn't have to play them. And the reality is the offensive line struggled after that. It did. It did.
And that's the point.
Rocco.
Yeah, no, that's the absolute point.
And
communication issues that were very obvious. And when you take a fifth of the starting line out, that can happen.
And that was a bit of an issue. I mean, look, here's the deal. When you watch the play of the offensive line, I thought they did some good things in the run game. Look, there's things that I'm going to criticize on the type of execution that they had. I didn't think that they struggled a lot with some of the combo blocks. It looked to me, and I was talking with somebody earlier who kind of confirmed this, but it looked to me that they were really worried about how aggressive the linebackers were for Indiana, and they were coming off their double teams way too quick on zone stuff, which was allowing the physical Indiana D lineman to kind of come off late and get to guys like you and I had said in the post-game show, and we were talking about it live. Like there was at least 4 or 5 plays where either Aeneas or Jadarian looked like they were about to break one, and a D lineman would just kind of come off late and bring them down.
Yes.
And a lot of that was due to them coming off of double teams too soon. And part of me wonders, like, if they get into a situation like that again, does Coach Denbrock choose to run more duo than inside zone? Because on duo, the emphasis is on staying on that double team a little bit longer. But you could tell, and there wasn't any need for it, because early in the game, the linebackers for Indiana were not flying downhill.
They were reading.
They were.
It was a lot of reading.
Yeah, and there was one play in particular where Jadarian got like 4. If Rocco stays on that double team and then comes off late, that number two, Jalen Walker was not coming off. He was not coming downhill. Rocco didn't have to work to him. If he keeps on that double team and then it comes off late, Jadarian might crease that thing, because they were getting a good push. So I thought there were some of those issues. I thought there were some miscommunication issues at left tackle in the run game, where there's a couple times where Anthony Knapp came off to try to catch a corner fire, and he left Billy Strouth out hanging out to dry a little bit. I thought that Anthony had probably the best block of the game on the 98-yard touchdown. I mean, that was a dominant block on Mikael Kamara. And shout out to Cooper Flanagan, who also destroyed the linebacker on that play also. I mean, those two opened up,
fitted him up like it had a solid 3-second block where he wasn't coming.
No doubt.
Yeah.
Outside of a couple other blocks, Anthony struggled, I thought, a little bit in the run game. With some of the line games they were doing, that factored in as well. He definitely struggled in pass pro. But the thing I liked about this line, though, Vince, is even though I don't think they played great football, part of it was because of Indiana, who's got a really good front seven. I mean, like, what you talk about confirming things on film that we thought going in. We thought going in, this is a really good blue-collar, hard-playing, hard-charging defensive line, and that's exactly what they were. C.J. West was really good. Mikael Kamara was really good, and he had a lot of wins on Saturday. The one time Anthony Knapp whipped his butt, 98
yards. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
that's football, though, man.
That's what you need with this running back room. You just got to whoop that. You just got to whoop Mikael Kamara one time.
Right.
And Jeremiah Love can do things to that defense that no other running back that they faced this year could do to them.
Exactly.
Which is rip them up. And so, that's the thing is they battled, though, Vince, especially in the first half. Even though they didn't play great, part of that is tip of the cap to Indiana's front for being really good. The other part of that is I felt their timing was a little off in some of the zone stuff. You could tell they couple the corner fires gave the tackle some issues, like, oh, I got to get out to that. Like, no, bro, you're running inside zone. Let that corner keep coming. You keep double teaming, keep getting that push with Billy, and he'll cut right behind it, which is exactly what Indiana wants you to do. They want you to come off that double team and try to get out to a corner fire. We talked about that going in. But so there was a lot of things that schematically you're going to want to clean up. A lot of things where it's like, look, you got to do a better job staying on your double team. Get that vertical push. Stay getting vertical, because they were like on that one that I'm thinking of, I think it was against C.J. West, but Pat and Rocco were getting a really nice initial push, but then Rocco comes off right away, and Pat wasn't where he needed to be to overtake the nose tackle because Rocco left too soon. And then the guy beats Pat, and so it looks like, oh, man, Coogan got beat. Well, yeah, he did, because Rocco left him too soon. If Rocco stays on that double team a little bit longer, it goes. And then
you got to allow your partner to kind of get over. And
that
take
happened
control.
in other times. It's not just the one with Rocco. And I thought outside of a couple plays like that, I thought Rocco was pretty good till he got hurt. But it's just an example of some things that the line had some issues with. Was that timing type of deal? But they played hard, and that's what we've always said. Vince, is it's one thing I'll give Joe Rudolph a lot of credit for this season is his offensive linemen. I can't really think of a game since Northern Illinois. That was the one game. But since then, there's been games we've criticized their play. I mean, we ripped them hard for the Louisville game, and they sucked against Louisville.
Yeah.
But what did we say after the game? They played hard, though. They battled. They competed. They just didn't play well. This is one of those games where I don't know that they necessarily played well, but they played hard. And when you play hard and you have talent of your own, and then talent at running back and quarterback like they have,
right?
Then like there's one particular play, the long touchdown pass to Jordan Faison that set up Riley's touchdown, right?
Yeah, the almost touchdown pass.
Anthony Knapp gets beat outside off the edge, but he recovered really nicely and just got a body on Kamara and rode him outside and allowed Riley to step. Like, dude, that's what happens when you play hard and you compete and you battle, and he's got that length. And then, Riley knows he's going to get drilled. Guy comes off late and he throws the ball. But that job of Anthony to kind of recover on that wide rush, get a body on the guy, ride him outside, and let Riley climb into the pocket without that guy getting a hand on Riley and kind of yanking him back, that resulted in a play that allowed them to go put the game away. So you can say, yeah, Anthony struggled, but he kept competing, he kept battling, and that allowed him to make that block in a moment that allowed them to put the game away. So I will give him a lot of credit for that. There's going to be there better be, by Joe Rudolph anyway, a lot of teaching tape from this game of we got to do better. We got to do better. Execution has to get raised a ton from what we saw on Friday night, but keep playing with the same toughness and physicality that we saw Friday night. Right, Vince?
Yeah.
Because what do we say a million times? As a coach, I can correct mistakes, but if you're not, it's hard for me to correct effort, right? If the effort's not there, then I might have to find somebody else, right? The effort was there on Friday night. Now they just got to clean up some of the technical things, not even technical things, because I thought just the timing things.
Well, technical is
things,
timing,
right?
Technically, when you're
what
talking
I mean is like
about.
I thought they used their hands pretty well in this game.
Yeah.
I thought they moved their feet through contact pretty well in this game. I thought they battled. They just got beat sometimes. Like first play of the game, Rocco just got beat across his face it was a heck of a play by the defensive tackle. There's a lot of times where it's like, boy, I said, I don't really know what to tell Pat Coogan on that one. That dude's just really good. You know what I mean? Like, and he won that one.
Right.
But Notre Dame won more of them. And that's why Notre Dame is practicing this week to get ready for another football game.
Exactly. All right, let's move on to the third key to victory offensively, and that would be keep IU off balance, tempo, movement, misdirection, attack all levels. I will say one thing. I thought they did a lot more shifts than usual. Like we've seen shifts all season, but there were a lot of late shifts in this one where Riley Leonard would get into his like clap and he would kind of see what IU was going to do, and then he would shift a guy. There was a lot of late shifts in this game. I don't remember seeing that as much, in the regular season as we did in this game. So there's a lot of moving around.
But not as much.
Yeah, not as much. Making IU, kind of tip their hand a little bit defensively before the ball was even snapped. I did see that a little bit on this one, Brian, but I will defer to you on this one. So your thoughts.
I'm trying to think of a reason to give him a minus just because I want to be a little bit of a tough grader, but no, I'm going to actually give him a bit of a minus on this one. I don't think they did enough to really get Indiana up. No, I'm going to give him a check. I think I was being negative just to look for something to complain about. Like there's a difference between saying they didn't do enough to win, and I would have liked to see more. How about that?
Okay, that's fair.
I would have liked to see them push the tempo a little bit more. I think you even said that to me during the game. Like they were really letting the clock get down, and they were, there was not a lot of pace in that game.
Agreed.
They did a decent job with motion, though. I thought even the touchdown run, they did a really nice job of getting lined up, doing a quick motion across. As soon as Indiana kind of adjusts, they're running the ball outside zone away from the motion. That's kind of what this was about, right, Vince? It's about using motion and movement to try to, affect Indiana. I thought they did a decent job. They were doing double shifts, then motions. I mean, they were doing a lot more movement than we've seen. So I give them a check. There were maybe a couple things I would like to see a little bit differently, and that's kind of where I was thinking minus. But the only thing that I really wanted to see more of is I would have liked to see them mix the tempo up a little bit. I think I would have liked to have seen, I thought Indiana, as aggressive as they were, there were some opportunities for maybe a reverse, maybe some things like that. But they ran a couple shovel passes.
They did.
One of them worked pretty solid gain. That's sort of a misdirection thing to get because we want to get the linebacker's eye discipline off. I mean, that was an example of that. You know, I maybe there could have been a couple things you could have done with Riley to kind of, you know, fake, you know, action one way, bring him backside, or maybe pull one way and hand off the other direction because they were keying on the guards pretty hard.
And they were keying on Jeremiah Love pretty hard too. I felt like there were some opportunities in there where when it was a handoff to Jeremiah Love, like a little keeper on the backside or
like a little quick reverse, something like that. Hey, you got something to slow him down. Like there were some of those things you could have seen. And I didn't think they attacked. Like when I first thought of this grade, I think part of the reason I also thought minus because my initial thought was before going into the film breakdown was it was going to be a minus because I didn't think they attacked on all three levels enough. But when I went and broke down the film schematically, they actually did attack the middle of the field and downfield more than it looked like watching live because the ball just didn't come. And a couple examples of that. There was a play in the first quarter. It was on that long touchdown drive where they ran a 3-by-1 with the tight end backside. The tight end ran a wide, I think he ran a wide fade route. Bo Collins is running a backside seam. And as soon as he clears the linebacker, there's a big window there that the ball has to come out quickly because the corner was facing inside. And if Riley would have waited and then thrown the seam, he would have squeezed on it, maybe picked it off or broke it up. But if Riley throws that ball into the window as soon as Bo Collins cleared, that's a 20, 25-yard, put it right on Bo. He catches it in the window for a big play. There was a red zone throw where they ran an out cut. There was a 2-by-2 with Eli Raridan to the boundary. They ran an out cut from Bo backside and then a crossing route. And Eli Raridan ran like a little quick post route, and he smoked the guy. Riley's got to get that ball out over top into the end zone, and that's an easy touchdown for Eli Raridan. They actually did a decent job. There was a play, the third down play to Bo Collins on that first drive. I mean, I'm fine with Riley's decision. He went where he should have gone to, but Jordan Faison's coming flying open on the crossing route. That if they would have taken Bo away, Riley could have come back to him. Like, that's not a criticism of Riley. When your first read is open, you throw the ball to your first read.
Yeah, exactly.
His first read was Bo's stop route. He threw it to Bo. It's the right decision. But if they would have taken that away with the corner being more aggressive, he's got Jordan Faison screaming across on a crossing route wide open. So I actually think they did and they took a deep shot. They threw the post route. They threw a go route early. So I think they did attack on all levels, even though the ball didn't necessarily come out on all three levels. And some of the stuff they did, they ran like a post corner route at one point in time. They ran a seam post corner with Jordan Faison, and Indiana was bailing underneath that stuff because Notre Dame has hit some of those throws lately. You know, they hit some downfield throws. They hit the corner for a touchdown against USC. They hit some deep balls against Army. They hit some deep balls against Navy. They hit some deep balls against Virginia up the seams. And I mean, if you really think about it, Notre Dame's hit a lot of deep shots in their last 4 or 5 games, starting with Navy. You know, Vince, and so I think Indiana's trying to play that, and that's a big reason why the checkdowns were so wide open.
Yeah, well, there was one play in the first half, Brian. Not to cut you off, but they were dropping 7 or 8.
3 years. You don't have to apologize. I cut everyone off. That's part of having a discussion. Just go into it, man. I got you.
There was a play where Notre Dame only put 2 guys in routes. Right, it was a 2-man route. And then eventually, I think it was Aeneas, but I'm not 100% sure. It's one of the running backs came out late, but it was a 2-man route. They dropped 7 guys into coverage to cover 2 guys, and they were all 20 yards downfield. Every single defender for IU was 20 yards downfield. The running back leaks out wide open. So obviously,
8-9 yard gain.
Exactly. Obviously, you're not throwing to the 2 guys that are deep because he's guarded by 7 defenders, right? But then it's an easy check down. You pick up 7-8 yards. Like, that's why, you know, when we talked in the post game about, you know, checking down and doing these different things, there was reasons that those were open, and there's reasons that those were the correct reads, because IU was just bailing, man. I mean, they were bailing on what they considered deep routes, and the running backs were wide open underneath. You take it and you move on. So I was happier even when watching the film and seeing how wide open those checkdowns were. because of the way IU was playing Notre Dame's pass game.
Yeah. And so he took so those are smart decisions by him to take some of those.
Yeah.
And that's why they were able to, a part of the reason they went 7 of 13 on third down is because he was willing to take some of those first and second down shots and say, hey, you know what?
Yep.
They're underplaying, so let me just dump it down.
Yeah,
and it also worked because then when they started bringing pressure in the second quarter and third quarter, there was still that window was still there, and he was able to kind of jump and get some of those balls off. And there's a couple times he literally completed I think 2 passes in this game where he completed a pass where his feet were not on the ground.
Right.
Because he was jumping to kind of throw it and take and absorb the hit.
Exactly. And get himself away from the rush just a little bit.
Right.
And get that ball off.
Yeah, exactly. And those are athletic plays, man. Kurt Cignetti actually talked about that after the game. He's like, there's not a lot of quarterbacks that can make some of the plays he was making today.
Correct.
And that was the most humble I've ever heard Kurt Cignetti in my life.
I watched the entire post game because I really wanted to watch and be the guy that was like, that kind of. So I'm watching the post game show. You're right. It was the most humble I've ever seen him. He was the most complimentary of Notre Dame that I ever thought could ever come out of his mouth. And specifically Riley Leonard. He mentioned Riley Leonard by name at least 4 times in that post-game press conference.
He said he was the player. I think he said he was there. They asked him what happened. He was like, well, Riley Leonard. Basically, it's the first thing I was about Riley Leonard. Right. He talked about how we had some good pressures on him, and he just was – and he's like getting away from – he's really athletic. He's getting away from pressure and making throws and, things that other quarterbacks can't do. And there were several times they asked him, did your defense struggle with this or did your offense? And he's like, guys, that was more about Notre Dame. He said that like 5 times. Bigger, faster, stronger.
Yeah.
He said it multiple times. Like, guys, that other team is just really good. He kept saying that.
I have to think that was what he really thought about this game going in is what he was talking about afterwards. There was a lot of blowhard, obviously, in pregame and going on the stage at game day and all these different things, right? And I think he was hoping that his guys would hear that and maybe get a little more pumped up or whatever. But what he really thought about Notre Dame going into this game is what he was saying after the game. Because you don't just come up with that while watching the game. You know what I mean? He's like, bigger, faster, stronger. He's like, that's who Notre Dame is right now. Like,
I don't know that I necessarily agree with that, Vince. I think that's partly true because I think they played that way. Like they played like a team that was worried about Notre Dame's speed. But I think there was still a level of, even though we thought we prepared for it, it's just now seeing it up front. Like that's just
he's been in the game a long time though, man. Like,
you know what I mean?
He's been at Alabama. Like he's seen bigger, faster, stronger.
I'm saying what's relative to what they thought Notre Dame was going to be coming in.
Okay.
Like I think that we talked about the reason they played their safeties back is because they knew these running backs are home run hitters.
Right. No,
But then you still aren't quite ready for it, even though you know it's coming, because you can't replicate that speed in practice. But I thought that he was very complimentary of Riley's ability, and this is why I named Riley the player of the game. Because I'm like, not only is it about the 201 passing yards and the 30-plus rushing yards and the 2 touchdowns and all that, he saved the offense at least 45, 50 yards on negatives that, as much as I love CJ Carr and Kenny Minchie and how smart Steve Angeli is and all that, they're not getting away from some of those pressures that he was getting. And not only that, to then not only save the negatives, but a lot of those plays turned into positives. So the net is even greater than, 40, 50 yards lost. It's even greater because of now you're gaining 5 yards, 6 yards, 7 yards, 8 yards on these checkdowns. And that made it really hard for them to deal with. So, I thought, and that kind of, check, that's number 4 is get Riley Leonard rolling early. I give him a check for that too. This, we just kind of answer that one now because we've kind of already transitioned to talking about Riley.
Okay.
He had the early pick, but guys were open. It was a nice, easy read. Guy was open. He just made a wrong decision, but I thought they did things in this game. There's a lot of Max Pro early events. They went with 7 tight ends early in the game, which I want to talk about that too. I think that was for 2 reasons. One is they wanted to do some Max Pro stuff. It's Max Pro, 2 tight ends blocking, 1 tight end blocking, another out on the route, the running back blocking. But just to give Riley some time on some of those deeper shots early that they called, but just they weren't open because they were, 4-on-2 down the field type of thing. But I think they also went 12 personnel early to make a statement to Indiana saying, hey, we're going to run right at you. Like, we're coming. And, we're not going to be afraid of your run game. We're going to come right at you. And I thought Mike Denbrock, who's not really a 12 personnel guy, he's more of an 11 personnel guy, coming out in the first drive and just going 11. And then he did it right again on the next series, coming out 12 personnel and just saying, our strength versus your strength is a matchup we like because we're better than you. And we're going to make a statement. And I loved it. But that kind of but I think that also helped Riley get comfortable early in the game because they were having those if the deep shot's not there, come underneath. This is also the best job these running backs have done of getting out of the backfield on some of this stuff too, Vince. And there was a couple times and where it was like the tight ends were blocking and they would just free release the back in a check down route. Like they were prepared for Indiana playing underneath the deep shots. And I think that's also factored into, like, you could tell that Coach McCullough put a lot of emphasis with his backs on, if they don't come, you get out now. Get out now and get your quarterback get your numbers to him. You could tell that was we've seen him do it to a degree, Vince, but we've never seen him show that much urgency getting into their check down rank area. Because when you throw a check down, a lot of times it's I'm coming down to the area that you're supposed to be at. I don't see you, but I see where the defense is going, and I'm coming down where you're supposed to be. So you're in like an area. And I thought they did a nice job there. And that's something else that also, I think, allowed Riley that comfort level that I can stick with my downfield read, stick with it, because I know the backs are going to be there.
Yeah.
And I can come down to them. And I thought that was a really wise part of the game plan.
I think, if you watch Riley Leonard, from the beginning of the season until now, I mean, he's incredibly comfortable in the pocket now than he ever was at the beginning of the season. And, a lot of that has to do with the continuity of the offensive line and all of those different things. But he looks very comfortable sitting in there. And for your example, right, the phase-on throw, the deep phase-on throw, he wasn't evading the pocket. He stepped up in the pocket. Like
climbed.
That's a Tom Brady type thing. Like, Tom Brady is not an athlete. He's not, but he is amazing.
The throw Ian Book was supposed to make.
Yes.
Against Clemson. That's what the post is there. Climb the pocket and let it rip.
Correct.
And you're there. That's exactly that same exact throw, and he made it.
Right.
And yeah.
And what I mean by comparing him to Tom Brady, I want to make sure everybody understands this. Like, Tom Brady was a master within a 10-foot circle of just a sidestep, a step up, whatever. That's what Riley did on that play. It was he felt the pressure, stepped up into the throw, right on the money. And I thought that you can't do that unless you're comfortable in the pocket with the offensive line and what's happening around you. And then, to your point, also comfortability with knowing he's got that check down ready to go too. He can hang in the pocket longer. He doesn't have to bail. He did some amazing things bailing out of the pocket in this game. There's no doubt about it. But he didn't do that unless he had to do it. He did it when he was about to get sacked. You know what I mean? It wasn't like he was seeing ghosts or, anything like that. He did a great job of pocket awareness and pocket comfortability, in my opinion, in this game. And that's a big step forward from where he was at the beginning of the season to where he is now. And obviously this is when you want him to be the most comfortable, in the postseason and all that, but he is, and you can just see it. And his play then shows it. And so I think that's a big one. So before we move on to the defense, Brian, do you have any more offensive observations that you want to hit?
Yeah. So the hitting those keys did not allow us to talk about another takeaway from the offense specifically. Okay. And that is, yes, they started fast to a degree. Yes, I give them a check. Yes, they established the line of scrimmage to a degree. Check. Yes, they did some things to keep Indiana off balance. Check. Yes, they did things to get Riley Leonard comfortable early. Check. Yes. But even within that, I still felt like this was a game where the offense left a lot of points on the board. Not just the missed field goal, but a lot of missed opportunities where if you just finish this block off, Jadarian's about to take one. Aeneas is about to pop one. Like Riley, if you just read this route correctly, you have a shot to hit a 15, 20-yarder there. Hey, Bo, you got to run. Like there was a route that Bo ran on the third down. I think it was the first drive of the second drive of the third quarter, first drive of the third quarter. Bo dropped the pass on third down. This is like there was no urgency on the route. The guy's playing inside. Bo tries to make a move from the outside instead of eating up his stem, attacking his leverage, having urgency, attacking with the stem, and then snapping it off inside. There's no urgency. And so he was covered pretty well. Riley throws the ball down and away where it's supposed to be, and Bo can't go down and make it. Like there was those type of opportunities where it's like you got to get – there's a screen pass that they ran where one guy misses his block. If he makes that block, you might be going for something, like there was some reads that Riley didn't make that he's got to get the ball. He's got to start looking for Jaden Greathouse more. He's got to. It's there. There's stuff there to get him the football. There was a lot of that type of stuff in the game, Vince, where it's like, boy, if they just would have been a little bit sharper, a little bit cleaner with some different things in the run game and sharper with some reads in the pass game, make some catches here, this offense should have scored even more, Vince. And that's a takeaway. It's like it's a negative, but it's also a positive because you basically doubled up what Indiana gives up on the season, and you took your foot off the gas after that last touchdown to make it 27-3. Like there was a lot of opportunity. I mean, a lot of opportunities, especially in that third quarter, to put this game away, and they didn't. And no, it didn't hurt you against Indiana, but you jump up on Oregon or Ohio State or even a Penn State or a Georgia 17-3 at halftime, and you miss those opportunities in the third quarter where you get nothing. You have first two drives, you're across midfield, either to start the drive or right after a play or two into the drive, and you come away with 3 points. That's how you let a really good football team back in the game. It didn't happen against Indiana, but you can't ask your defense to be that way the rest of the way. You're going to have to put some of those things down. And so those are aspects that I look at and say, hey, man, we got to be able to do some more of this type of stuff where you got to hit some of these throws. You got to stick on your double team a little bit more, not miss those almost chances, have to be hits. And so I did want to comment on that. It wasn't one of the 4 keys specifically, but when you break down the film, like I'm telling, hey, Vince, look at this play and tell me what you think about it. And you're like, oh my gosh, that guy's open and that guy's open. And you got to do this, you got to do that.
Yeah.
And next week against Georgia, those are plays where you can't have those almosts. Those almost got to be hits.
Yeah.
And that's something that I'm sure Mike Denbrock's going to have a lot of time talking with the offense about when they break down the Indiana film is, guys, moving forward, this was good enough for Indiana. Well done. But against Georgia, against Penn State, against, Texas, Ohio State, Oregon, whoever you get down the road, I mean, for them, it's going to be Georgia. But for us, it's whatever. We got to hit those throws. That's what Mike Denbrock's saying to him. We got to stick on that. We got to stay on that double team a little bit longer. So those missed opportunities need to stop being missed opportunities as you get to the postseason. Good enough to beat Indiana, but barring I don't know that there's a team worse than Indiana. Or, I shouldn't say worse because I think Indiana's a really good football team, but everybody going to play from here on out is better than Indiana.
Yeah.
At the very least, as good as Indiana.
That's okay to say. I mean, that's okay to say. So, yeah. All right. Well, that's going to do it for our offensive keys to victory revisited. Make sure you hit that like button, that subscribe button, that notification bell, share with your family and friends, and of course, jump on the boards at irishbreakdown.com for further conversation about these topics, as well as some film review and some breakdowns of that nature. So you're definitely going to want to check that out because you're probably going to want to have something to do when your in-laws show up. I'm just saying, you want to get on the boards and kind of check out. That's okay too. So make sure you jump on the boards at irishbreakdown.com. All right, Brian, we got some defensive keys to victory to discuss. And this should be a fun one because I said this before the show started. I thought it leaving the game, it was enhanced for me after watching the film. To me, I feel like this was one of the best defensive efforts, games that this Irish defense has played all season. I mean, they were just really, really, really good. IU just didn't know where the pressure was coming from. They couldn't recover. I mean, it was textbook defense and how to play defense in a big game situation. But let's get specific with the defensive keys to victory. First one up is dominate up the middle. And obviously what that means is defensive tackles linebackers. It's like baseball. You got to be strong up the middle if you want to be good. Yeah, safeties specifically, got to be strong up the middle. Same thing applies for a football defense. You've got to be strong up the middle. Were they in this game?
Definitely a check on this one. I mean, close to a plus, but I don't want to completely go there because there's definitely there's some fits from the linebackers that need to be better. There's a couple times, some of those early runs where I thought, Howard Cross got whooped early on. He didn't look 100% at all, Vince. He definitely didn't have the same burst he had. I'm hoping that in the next game he'll just get healthier and healthier and healthier. He didn't play
12
great.
days off is not a bad
to the point
situation.
Where you had said I don't think he played much. He had over 50 snaps, but he just didn't do anything noticeable. But like he was out there, he competed. You could just tell you could tell he didn't have juice coming off the ball. A couple times I thought Gabriel Rubio got sealed on a couple of those stretch plays early on where they were able to gash him, but those were few and far between. I thought the middle played great. I thought the defense, Riley Mills before he got hurt was destroying Indiana's offensive line. I mean, it was like we talk about your dudes got to be dudes. He was a dude. There was a play where he was actually slanted against Carter Smith. Their 6'5", 315-pound left tackle and just threw him to get in the backfield. There's another play early, Vince. It was after the interception where he just destroyed the guard. And the guy held him because he was about to get whooped. And that backed him up 10 yards, for holding. What we do is usually you watch the line and I watch downfield when we're watching games live. So I didn't see what the hold was. And he goes, oh, they held Riley. You're like me, like, oh, they held Riley big time. He played phenomenal. When he went down, they weren't as good up the middle, but they were still good, right? Like they weren't dominant like Riley was, but they were doing their job up front. That's how I felt about it. And I thought Donovan Heinisch continued to play good football that he's been playing for the last month of the regular season, but they weren't quite as good when Riley went out. But again, still won the battle there. But I thought the linebackers played very well. This is one of the most aggressive games I've seen Drake Bowen play at Notre Dame. I mean, he was flying down. And some of them were on design stunts. Like first play of the game, he just blew into the A-gap, Vince, and just blew that play up. Like Josh Burnham made the tackle for loss, but Drake's the one that made him cut back inside. There was 3 or 4 times where the running back had to cut inside and somebody else made the play, but it was Drake blowing up an offensive lineman or shooting into the gap to force the running back to cut early. I've said this a million times. I'll say it again because it's always true. The further back behind the line you can force a running back to make his cut, the better it is for your football team. So like the play Josh Burnham made on the first play of the game, that's a great job by Josh Burnham, but that was great team defense because it was Drake destroying the A-gap and blowing it up and forcing that running back to cut into Josh that allowed Josh to make that tackle for loss. And I thought Drake, I mean, he had like 2, first of all, Notre Dame scored people. Stop being so dang stingy with assisted tackles.
Seriously.
Right? Drake Bowen had more than 2 tackles in his football game, okay? Just saying. But he didn't have like 10. But what made Drake so effective is he was doing his job of blowing up blockers and forcing running backs to early cut 3-4 yards behind the line of scrimmage, which allowed Jack to rally to the ball, which allowed the backside ends to rally to the ball, allowed the safeties to come flying downhill and eat up cutbacks and things like that. I thought the inside linebackers played very well in that regard. I thought Jack Kaiser did a really good job with pursuit. There's a play where I think it was Drake, but basically he was running inside zone and they blew it up and he cuts outside and Jack was going on it was Jalen Sneed. He was moving to his right and he takes Jalen Sneed and he kind of moves him into the gap he was supposed to be in while the play is going on. And then the running back, it gets bottled up. The running back cuts backside. We've seen this running back do this a million times this year, Vince, and every time he bounces it for 5-10 yards where they kind of wash the line down and take off, and Jack plants on his right foot and explodes outside and tackles the guy for like a 1-yard gain. And you're like, that's what we keep talking about. Yep. That running back thought, uh-oh, here I go, and Jack was on him like that. I mean, boom, flies to the football. Yeah. That was impressive. I thought the Notre Dame linebackers didn't make a ton of plays on the ball. Like if you look at their stat numbers, Vince, they're not going to blow you away. Like Drake had 2 tackles. Thank you. My voice is shot, so I had to text Angela. Can you get me another please? Because I'm about to lose it. Yes, please. Yeah. In there. Thank you. She's going to make me some hot tea. Jack had 5 tackles. Jaden Osborne had 3. Jalen Sneed had 2. Drake had 2, right? But that's not a lot of tackles. But here's the thing. Drake had 2 tackles, 1.5 tackles for loss. Jalen Sneed only had 2 tackles, but one of them was a tackle for loss. Jaden Osborne only had 3 tackles, but 2 of them were tackles for loss. You know what I mean? Like, they were super impactful in that regard, Vince. But the other thing, too, is they were blowing up runs to where they were forcing those early cutbacks. And with Notre Dame, what are the 2 runs that worked for Indiana? They were runs where they were stayed on their path, stretch, and then cut at or past the line of scrimmage. That's what you want to be. When they were cut behind the line, they're done. Notre Dame's too fast. You're done.
Yep.
And the linebackers, even though, again, the numbers weren't great as far as like, oh, Drake had 10 tackles or Jack had 10 tackles. I mean, the tackles for loss, I repeat, 1, 2, 3, 4.5 tackles for loss from your inside linebackers in this game. That doesn't even include how many tackles for loss, because Notre Dame had 10 tackles for loss in this game, Vince. But I'd say not only did they have the 4.5 that they had, but I'd be willing to bet you that half of them, if we broke down the film and counted them, half of the other tackles for loss would have been plays where it was actually the linebacker that forced the running back to cut into the hands of somebody else. I'd be willing to bet you that's the case.
Right.
And by the way, that did tie their team high on the season with 10. It tied the Florida State team high.
Right.
Of 10 this season. So in the last 2 years, they've only had 10 or more tackles for loss 3 times. Florida State, USC last year, and Indiana on Saturday. And linebackers played a huge, huge role in that. And they're going to – it's like that's why Drake Bowen's that dude.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Right? That's why Jaden Osbury's that dude. That's why Jack Kaiser's that dude. You see it. Anyone that's going to tell me that these kids aren't fast, I actually had somebody who I respect, you know who it is, tell me that these linebackers don't play fast.
Really?
Not telling me that after this game. You
Yeah.
better. Otherwise, I'm like, well, you're just biased at this point in time because they played fast.
Yeah.
Real fast.
Yep. No doubt about it. I'm with you 100%. This is borderline, like, strength up the middle is borderline a check plus for me. I understand where you're coming from. You and I were talking about this during the game about, what Indiana was trying to do offensively, especially in the run game and where they had success and where they didn't have success. There were times where they tried to run it up the middle and they might as well have been running into a wall. Like it wasn't happening running up the middle. All of their success was outside. Like you said, and they were stretch plays and some things like that. When they just tried to run like a straight toss or, straight, like get to the outside play, they didn't have success doing that. But it was more like the stretch, like and then cut kind of a situation. They did have a little bit of success doing that. But when they tried to run straight up the middle, it wasn't happening. And that's where I'm teetering on the check plus area, just because in the run game, they had nothing up the middle. But I mean, I know it's bigger than that too. So
I think if Riley Mills wouldn't have got hurt, it would have ended up being a plus.
That's fair. I think that's fair.
Because because if you talk about the way he was playing combined with the way that Drake was playing and the way Jack and you know what I mean, like that would have made it a plus in my opinion.
Yeah,
if they would have done that.
That's fair. No, that's fair. I think that's absolutely a fair assessment. So, checks from both of us on that one. Next key to victory on the defensive side of the football: be disciplined, leverage double moves. Switch routes, misdirection, all of those different things. Can you be disciplined in the back, in the front, all of the above? How do you think they did?
Well, Vince, you kind of talked about this earlier. I think you made a comment about how they were just where they needed to be the entire game. I think I don't know if that was during the show or if that was with you and I talking before the show.
It was that. Yeah.
But you made a comment like this is one of the best execution. Well, I'll let you. I mean, I'll let you say it because like you nailed it in our conversation before about how disciplined this team was against a team that's not easy to be disciplined against.
Right. It was. I had mentioned that this is the best team defensive effort that I've ever seen this season from this defense. Like we've seen a lot of individual dominance in games, and we've seen position dominance in this game. Position group dominance in this game. In games. This was the best team defense that I've seen. Now, the team defense allowed Notre Dame individuals to be successful. And it kind of harkens all the way back to the beginning of the show when we were talking about, Marcus Freeman and team success, then leads to individual success. Look, Xavier Watts had one of the best games I've ever seen a safety have, right? I mean, he was unbelievable in this game, but he was unbelievable in this game because of what the team defense looked like and what he was able to do off of that. And I thought that it was the same way, similar to what you were talking about with the linebackers. They may not have made the play, but they forced the ball outside so a defensive end could make the play, or a corner could make the play, or whatever. They communicated on the back end extremely well, passing off routes, doing some things on the back end, that you need to be able to communicate and do. I mean, it was the best team defense that I've seen this play. And then that allowed the athleticism and the speed to really shine, because they were in the right place, doing the right thing, and then they were able to just fire out of a cannon and make a play. And we just saw that over and over and over in this game, and that's what stood out to me. It was a team effort, but then individuals were able to shine within that team effort, and that's where I was.
Well, you talk about Xavier Watts, that huge pick, but Jack Kaiser undercutting that crossing route, and Jordan Kaiser playing it over top, or Jordan Clark playing it over top. I mean, they literally had that guy perfectly bracketed.
Yes.
And
it was a terrible read on the
right, but he tries to defend that ball in there, and it's like, you get picked off. But it was and again, I could literally point to almost every mistake that I like, big mistake they remember them making. You know what I mean? It was, Christian Gray had really good coverage on that first ball he got beat. He just was a little late looking back. I mean, he's got the guy. It's a great catch. He almost tips it. It hits the guy in the knees. He bounces it up and he catches it. Like, you made him earn every yard, Vince. There was a I think it was Drake that had a run fit that I didn't like, that I thought he needed to get around to the A gap and allowed an inside cut lane. But even then it's like, you're like, oh my gosh, that's a big run lane. Next, it's a 7-yard gain because they just swarmed to the ball so fast.
Yeah.
That's another thing that Kurt Signetti said when he's listing off all the things that they do well on defense. And he's like, and they just swarm to the football. And he's absolutely
Team
right.
defense,
I mean,
man,
you think you're about to rip one off, and then all of a sudden 3 guys just close on you in a hurry. And there was a couple times where, I thought the edge rushers were a little too wide. There was a couple times, like I said, Rubio got sealed inside. One time Howard Cross got knocked off the ball. I mean, you can point to some of those instances, but they were few and far between, and there was almost always in every instance somebody overcoming that play.
Yeah.
But you talk about team defense. I mean, that's partly why nobody outside of Xavier Watts had great individual stats, is because so many different guys made plays. I mean, nobody had more than 5 tackles outside of Xavier Watts, but it's like Clark had 5, Adon had 5, Kaiser had 5, Jaden had 3, Hurd had 2, Snead had 2, Logan Thomas had 2, Leonard Moore had 2, Christian Gray had 2, Drake Bowen had 2, Josh Burnham had 2 in a tackle for loss, Gabriel Ruby had 2, Riley Mills had 2. I mean, it just was like, you had 10 tackles for loss. Only one guy had more than 1. I'm sorry, Drake Bowen had 1.5. Osborne had 2. It was like a half, a 1,
right,
1, 1.5, 1, 1, 2. This is a bunch of guys making plays. It wasn't just, wow, did you watch so-and-so take that game over? Now, Riley Mills might have done that if he'd have stayed in the game. He was on the verge of that. But, I mean, it also speaks volumes about how they didn't really do – Indiana couldn't do anything on them in the second half until they called off the dogs without Riley Mills.
Mm-hmm.
And, it just speaks volumes about how good the team defense was. So, just played within the system. You and I talked – we got our answer, Vince. You and I asked the question. And it was – how much will having extra time to prepare for this offense help out Al Golden and the staff, because you have better players than them, but they're schemed up really well. Can you be prepared for that? And the game plan was outstanding. And it was, I've heard people say it's not a very complex defense, and I understand where they're coming from, but I think that's underselling it. They make it look easier than it is. I mean, they're rolling different people and asking people to do different things. It doesn't look like a complicated defense unless you really study it week to week to week to week, and you realize it's actually not as easy as people make it seem to be. They just play it so well, they make it look simple. And
they're very comfortable. Like the defense is very comfortable with Al Golden's scheme. And I mean, yes, this is year 3. I get that, but it is very obvious that these guys are very comfortable with what Al Golden wants to do, and they're thriving in it. I mean, look, they were always good, but they're thriving in it now. It's like they're all on the same page as far as what Al Golden wants from this defense and what their role is within the defensive scheme. And it feels obvious to me because they all know what the other guy is doing at this point. You know what I mean? It's not just, hey, do your job. Like, I get that, but it just feels like with the way they play, they know what the guy next to him is going to do. So they know they can do their thing and they don't have to worry about it. And they know that their teammate, their brother is going to do what they need to do. It's kind of hard to articulate, but it's so clear to me that Al Golden has his pulse on what this defense is and who this defense is. And these kids are just executing it, man. And it's like a second nature at this point. And it's fun to watch. Like when a defense is playing like Notre Dame's defense with the speed and athleticism that they have, it's just fun to watch, man.
Well, I mean, you've got smart kids. Number one. For sure. Notre Dame recruits smart. And that's not the tired, lazy, oh, you have to be smart to come. No, they look for that. When they're evaluating Dallas Golden and Jadon Blair and Mark Zachary, they're not just looking at film of their athleticism. They're talking to them about the game. I mean, I've talked to Jadon Blair about this. We've talked to other guys about this. And they're like, we're just sitting in the film room and they're just talking to us and they're just coaching us up because they want to see. Now, the players just think, hey, they're just learning their but they want to see what the recall is like. They want to see what the responses are like. They want to see how the football mind of these guys think. So you want to know partly why Notre Dame is so high on Jadon Blair and Dallas Golden and guys like that, Mark Zachary and Cree Thomas. It's not only they physically talented players, but they know that they have high football IQs. They're very smart football players, which allows you to do more. And also, it also includes great teaching because you're teaching it at a high level and in a way where they are able to receive it. And in this game, especially, you saw that, Vince. And it's it's a plus. I mean, I don't know if I said check at the beginning or what, but I mean, it's a plus.
It's a plus. Yeah.
It's a plus.
Yeah, completely agree with that. Third key to victory for the defense was constant pressure on Rourke, the IU quarterback. Thoughts on that one?
Vince, I'm very curious to hear what your thoughts are on this one. I'm giving him when I'm like after I say it. I thought the pressure on Rourke was good at times. I give him a check because it was good enough, and it was good enough early to kind of get to him and kind of cause him to make some mistakes. But I think the things that hurt Curtis Rourke more were the manner in which they disguised their coverages. I think kind of mentally got in his head a little bit. I didn't think the pressure was as consistent as I wanted it to be. I give him a check still, but it's not a real convincing check. It's like a check because you did enough. The thing for me is they only had 12 pressures according to Pro Football Focus, but 5 of them resulted on hits on the quarterback. And I'd say it's probably a little bit more than that. But I would have probably counted them with a couple more pressures than that. But overall, I didn't think they were great in this area. Like, this wasn't like Ohio State where they just overwhelmed Curtis Rourke with pressures. It wasn't like that at all. They overwhelmed them with coverage. They covered at an elite level in this game. And like, even when guys were getting beat, they were getting beat because you had to make a great ball and a great catch out with one exception. But here's why the pressure, I say, was good enough. There was one play where Rod Hurd got smoked on a corner route. Smoked. Like a good ball, it might be 6. But he overthrew the guy. Why? Because he threw it off his back foot and they had pressure on him. And I think it was Drake actually had the pressure on him. And so he sailed the ball. So when you needed it, you got there. But I thought as the game went on, the linebackers started to, from a pressure, started to kind of hunt for contact a little bit more than I would have liked on some of those pressures. The timing, I think Indiana adjusted their cadence a little bit. Early in the game, they were going a little slower, and Notre Dame's linebackers were teeing off on them. I think they started to mix up their tempo a little bit later in the game, and a couple times it kept the pressure from going. But it was good enough, but it wasn't great. And especially when Riley Mills went down, I think that hurt that pressure a little bit as well. But I did think that the edge pressure was pretty decent in this game, though, Vince.
Yeah.
Like you had Junior had that one pass breakup where he beat the guy and he was getting held.
Yeah.
Up, tipped the pass. I thought Bryce Young had a couple really nice edge pressures.
That one where he came off the edge.
Oh my god!
And the offensive tackle just almost completely
no
whiffed.
chance.
Like he had no idea that Bryce his first move was as quick as it was. Like it was over at the snap.
Yeah.
And I mean, he just came around and made the play. I was like,
and there was a couple times too. I think Notre Dame baited Indiana into running the ball. There was a couple times on third down. People were like, why are they running the ball there?
I'm like, third and long.
Yeah. And you're like, no, they're doing that because a lot of times they were in 2-down territory. And so, like, if you're in 3rd and 10 at midfield or 45 going in, you may say, hey, look, we're going to pop a run right here because if we can get 7 or 8 yards, we're now in 2-down territory.
Yeah.
And whereas if we throw an incomplete pass, we're punting. And there was a couple times I thought Notre Dame showed an edge pressure that baited Indiana trying to pop a quick inside zone, and then they slanted into the zone. And then there was another time they ran it, and I think it might have been Riley Mills, but Riley Mills just destroyed the tackle. And then Jalen Steed came screaming off the backside edge, and they blew it up. So that was part of the pressure, too. Even though that didn't impact Curtis Rourke, I think it did impact the run game. That's why some people say, man, it was real conservative running the ball on third down. I don't think that was being conservative. That was part of being in 2-down territory, and they're thinking, like they've done all year, we're going to pop a little six inside zone. We're going to minimum get 5 or 6 and put us in 2-down territory and going for it on 4th down territory, or we might pop this one for a first down. And guess what? They'd been doing that all year, Vince. But that's where the interior just whooped them, and then they were able to get some of those linebacker pressures off the edge that really shut it down. And so that those weren't conservative play calls. That was Al Golden baiting them into running the football, and then he would slant the defensive line right into it. Or like in the case with Riley Mills, he just said, "You're not going to get between me and the football. Sorry." I mean, it was unreal.
I want to add just a little twist to this as well, Brian, and you hit all the great points about the front, what they were able to do or not able to do at certain times. You know, when I saw this key, and I didn't read your description, I just saw the key, right? And it was get pressure on Rourke, or keep the pressure on Rourke, or whatever it was. For me, in this particular game, I feel like he was also pressured by the secondary because they were in his head, and there were times where he was making throws where he was not stepping into those throws. He was not confident about where he was going with the football and things like that. And so while I agree with you that I don't, the front didn't get the pressure that I would like on a consistent basis, I do think the way the secondary was covering, I think there was some pressure, between the ears as well. Yeah. And then he was he was slow on his reads. He wasn't confident on his reads, and he made some real questionable throws that he just did not execute. There were some times where the ball just went, right into the dirt, or, he just missed a guy, that kind of a deal. And so, I think that's part of it. I think that's part of it. I'm like a check here, because I think they did enough to really affect Curtis Rourke and what he wanted to do back there and what IU wanted to do as a whole. And I think that's also why they were running the ball on third down to a degree, because I don't think they trusted necessarily that they were going to be able to do some things with the ball in Curtis Rourke's hands throwing the football. I do think that. And I think that's part. I agree that they were probably in 2-down territory and all of those things, but there's a lot of teams out there that would run a pass play to get half of that back, or, to get closer and make it a more manageable 4th down attempt, those kinds of things. And they were handing the ball off. Like I just felt like Notre Dame was in the head of Curtis Rourke in this game. And I think the secondary had something to do with that. So I just wanted a little twist on that. So
what did you think of the pressure? Do you agree with me there, or do you think it was more effective than I do?
I feel like it was more effective early, and I think a lot of that had to do with Riley Mills. And because it was effective early, they almost didn't have to be as effective late. Does that make sense? Like,
yeah, but I wanted that helped to hit with some of those RPOs they started hitting the second quarter to move. Like, they converted a couple third and longs because they were able.
That's frustrating.
So yeah, but that's a good. I mean, again, to get it to 27-3,
Right.
You were making a lot of stops. And it wasn't like Indiana outside that first drive was moving the ball into scoring zone easily, and then they were just getting stopped or turning it over. I mean, they'd cross midfield a couple times and then just get stoned.
Yeah. I feel like they did enough early on that Curtis Rourke was seeing some ghosts in this game. Now, I wanted it more. I wanted more.
Which is what the Indiana fans told us wasn't going to happen because he's so experienced and he's played against Big Ten competition all year.
He's from Canada. He was birthed in the snow, from what it sounded like. So it's all good.
He wasn't birthed having to face the Notre Dame defense.
This is also true. All right, final defensive key to victory that we need to revisit here was just get the ball. I assume that means turnovers, turn IU over, do those different things. They got the big turnover, obviously, early on that led to points. What say you on the get the ball key?
They're good. I mean, they got the ball they needed to get. There weren't as many opportunities in this game, Vince, to get the ball because I felt like he missed a lot of opportunity. I mean, he was missing bad. He made a couple great throws on go routes. I mean, the one that he beat Christian Gray on early and then for the touchdown, but there's a lot of times he was throwing the ball out of bounds. And we did not see that a lot from Curtis Rourke on film.
Right.
I mean, he was dropping back and he would just it was like Leonard Moore was so thoroughly covering his boundary receiver. He was just throwing the ball out of bounds. Or he just was so rattled that he couldn't keep the ball in bounds. But I like to think that I have a hard time believing that's the case.
Yeah.
Because, that we just never have seen that from him. But so there weren't quite as many of those get the ball opportunities as there have been in the past. But the one they got early was huge. I mean, that was a huge, huge, huge play. Because, winning the turnover battle is important. Notre Dame did not win the turnover battle. I think it was 1-1, right?
Yeah.
They both had both
interceptions, I believe.
But Notre Dame's was so big because it negated the one that Indiana had.
Correct.
Yep. And that made it big. So I'm giving them a check here.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Because the one turnover they did have was absolutely massive. I mean, it obviously led to the 98-yard touchdown run and, all of those things. And on top of that, like you also said, I just feel like I'm repeating you. I apologize, but it negated the bad interception that Notre Dame threw. I mean, it took that one, it wiped it right off the board. So it was a twofold interception, wipes out the one that Notre Dame had, and then also led to points. And it wasn't just that it led to points. Like, it would have been great if they would have went on like a 16-play drive at that point that led to a touchdown. But they still had the momentum of that interception from a crowd standpoint. And then the very next play, you rip off a 98-yard run. Like, they were eating out of Notre Dame's hands at that point, as far as the crowd was concerned. I mean, you and I were like tackling each other, on the balcony up there. Like, we were fired up, and we're pretty calm usually, you know what I mean? And so if we were fired up, what does that
even
say
outside,
about the rest of the rest of the stadium? So it was, the timing of it was perfect. And then the answer by the offense off of it was perfect as well. So even though it was 1-1, it was like 1.9 to 1, like it just from the way that it right. affected the game. But you're right. They didn't really have a lot of opportunities to turn the ball over.
Yeah.
Not a lot of punts.
It didn't make a lot of opportunities. Like, again, there weren't a lot of tip balls that were potentially catchable. There wasn't a lot of throws where like the corners were stepping in front of slants. They were kind of giving those little quick, easy inside slant routes in the second half of the game. They weren't giving them to him early. It's just why, I mean, he almost a couple times Rourke he saw that they were locked up and he just threw remember that first pass of the game, or the first, I think it was the first third down, where they ran an RPO and they just bracketed it, and he just threw the ball 5 feet behind his receiver into the ground.
Yeah.
Like, oh my God, what a terrible throw. You're like, that's not a terrible throw. That's a quarterback running an RPO, and he sees it's covered, and he can't take off running like Riley Leonard does, so he just throws the ball 5 feet behind where nobody's going to catch it.
Yeah.
Curtis Rourke is not that inaccurate. It's that route's covered. I don't have a next option because we're running an RPO.
Right.
And they baited him into it, and then he's got to throw it behind.
Right.
There were some throws like that too, and that's where he was smart not to allow those type of plays to turn into that's where Curtis Rourke actually did a pretty good job. Is plays where Notre Dame would bait a quarterback into throwing in other games, he would not do, and he would just throw it away, throw a check down, do something different with it. Where there's a couple times they ran in cuts where Notre Dame was trying to bait him into throwing that cross or the in cut, and he wasn't taking the bait. And so he'd take a check down or go to the next guy or throw it away or get sacked. And that limited some of the turnovers as well.
Sure.
In this game.
Any other observations about the defense before we move on?
I mean, we covered a lot of that in the opener, Vince.
Agreed.
I was so impressed by their preparation. I was so impressed by the speed at which they played the game.
Yep.
While also playing discipline. Like the concern you can have, Vince, in a game like this where they're so amped up and they're so fired up is they play a little out of control.
Sure.
And they didn't. And it was really, really impressive team defense. And I was just a huge kudos to the Notre Dame defensive staff for getting this group ready to play.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm annoyed that they gave up the 2 touchdowns late. I understand why Al Golden did it. We have a super chat about it, so I'll leave my explanation for the super chat so we don't repeat ourselves. But it's like when your biggest beef from a game is you gave up 2 garbage touchdowns. I would have liked to seen you win by 24 instead of 10 in a game that was never really in doubt past the middle of the second quarter. You're in, it's first world problems right there, brother. Just tremendous job of getting this group ready to play against a well-coached Indiana football team. And I watched some knucklehead on YouTube, some real popular Georgia Bulldogs show they put on the board, and it's got like 30,000 subscribers. It's like, Indiana's not a well-coached football team. I'm like, what you don't know, because you have not watched either of these teams play before, what you don't know is that you just paid Notre Dame the greatest compliment you could imagine by calling Indiana not a well-coached football team. But if you had never watched Indiana before Friday night, Vince, you would come away thinking that's not a great, really well-coached team, especially at least on offense anyway. That's what you'd come away thinking if you never watched them before. You and I watched them a ton, and we know that's an incredibly well-coached football team, which is why they're here, which is why they're 11-1. And Notre Dame made them look not well coached because of how well they were prepared, how well they executed. And huge shout out to the players, huge props to the players and the coaches for that game plan and executing that game plan. And I'll tell you something that's funny. I was ran into a friend the night before the game who's part of the program, and we were out to dinner with my family. I saw him, and he says to me, so I didn't say it beforehand, but he says to me, he goes, "We're going to kick the out of them tomorrow night." Never has said anything like that to me before. Very calm, mild-mannered guy. Hey, it's a great opponent. We're just going to give it. I mean, that's how this team, that's how prepared this team was to dominate. This wasn't a, hey, we've got to win the game. It was to dominate. It's like they just knew, watch film, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to kick the – and they did. I mean, I know it 27 – that game was not even close.
No.
Like, not even close. And
I do feel like the vast majority of people understand that. You know what I mean? If it doesn't fit their narrative, then fine. But like
even
the
Scott
vast
Van
majority
Pelt said that, Vince. We were in the car. He's like, guys, this score is not nearly as close as that game actually was. You know what I mean? Like, they scored a garbage touchdown. They got an onside kick and scored another garbage touchdown. I mean, I was very impressed by how this team played. Yeah, very impressed with it, and a lot of young players. This is the biggest stage they've ever been on. Really, Drake Bowen, Leonard Moore, Christian Gray, Adon Schuler. Those guys didn't play meaningful downs on defense last year against Ohio State. Games like that. This is really. I mean, they played against Texas A&M, but this is their biggest. This is the biggest stage they've ever been on, and they played like they were vets. Mm-hmm. And that says a lot about their preparation, Vince. High-level execution comes from high level of preparation. Yep. And we saw that in this game. So that's my overall big picture. And as in the point you made earlier, you were spot on, Vince. This is some of the best team defense we've seen from them. This might be the best team defensive performance when you consider the moment, the opponent, and how they played. Yep. Were they more dominant against other teams? Yes, because those teams stink. Right. But as far as like the level of, again, when they scored, what was it, Vince? When Notre Dame scored with 4:50 left to make it a 27-3 game, Indiana had 152 yards of offense at that moment. That's just pure dominance.
Yep, that's exactly right. Exactly right. All right, well, that's going to do it for our defensive keys revisited, everybody. We still have another segment to get to, so don't go anywhere. But hey, in the meantime, hit that like button, that subscribe button, that notification bell, share with your family and friends. Of course, jump on the boards@irishbreakdown.com. An annual membership is the gift that keeps on giving, and there's only a few days before Christmas. So if you need that last little stocking stuffer, boards@irishbreakdown.com, folks. I'm just saying, get after it. You will be the most loved person at Christmas. I'm just saying, if you're looking for that title, that's what you'll get if you get somebody an annual membership to the board. So boards@irishbreakdown.com. All right, Brian, I don't know if you are aware of this, but there were 3 other football games.
They don't matter. They're not Notre Dame. Move on. No, I'm kidding.
There were 3 other football games that were played this weekend, specifically yesterday. And because Notre Dame played on Friday, we just got to sit back, relax, and just watch some football. There's some other stuff going on too, but we were watching a lot of football, and we kind of wanted to take the final segment of tonight's show and just kind of talk about those games and kind of what it means big picture. We can talk about, each individual game, all of those kinds of things. But for the first round of the college football playoff 12-team format took place this weekend. I think that, the actual football itself, maybe people are just let down by that, but the lead up to this college football playoff was unlike anything we've ever seen, I would say, in college football, and the excitement level leading up to it. And I feel like the games could only be a letdown at that point with all the excitement level that there was.
Yes.
You know what I mean? But all I care about is that Notre Dame won, but there were all the home teams won in this one, which I think is a point that needs to be talked about. The environments and all of those different things. It was obviously all the higher seeded teams.
The 2 Southern teams that had to come up north both got blown out.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely part of it. So give me kind of your overall thoughts, and then we'll just kind of jump into some of these games and kind of give our thoughts.
I mean, it went how we expected the weekend to go based on who won. I mean, you and I both picked all 4 winners.
I think I picked Penn State to get upset.
Really? Okay.
SMU let me down again. But
I know, right?
Okay. It's okay.
You picked them to lose to Louisville, and it just was never the same after that. You just kept thinking,
I know.
I picked all 4 to win. I thought Penn State would win. I thought it'd be a competitive game. I picked Texas to win by 14. They won by 14, although it was more competitive than I thought it was going to be. I had it as a 31-17 game, but I just thought it was a game where it's clearly Texas the better team, and they were the better team. But Clemson battled in that game, and it was a little bit closer than maybe it might have looked. And, I had Ohio State winning. I thought they would win as long as they handled the noise from the last couple weeks effectively. And they did. I did not see them dominating Tennessee the way that they did. I am not shocked that Ohio State's defense dominated Tennessee the way that it did. I am shocked at the way that their offense did. So there was a lot of the results weren't surprising. The WL wasn't surprising, but they weren't really competitive games. I mean, the Clemson 14-point loss was the most competitive game. And really by halftime, Texas was in control and never lost control, although Clemson kept scoring to make it closer. And there was a couple times if they can score here, they cut it to 7 late in the game, 31-24. And, it was a lot like the Louisville game for Notre Dame, where they scored first and then Texas kind of took over after that. 28-10 at halftime. And then Clemson clawed back in, that kind of thing. It wasn't like a back and forth game the entire game.
Right.
I was surprised at how uncompetitive the other games, really all 4 games were. I mean, honestly, I thought Vince, like I predicted all 4 teams to win, but I think I said in the show that we did last Saturday, or maybe I was with Bill, I picked all 4 of the favorites to win because I just think they're the better teams. But I was like, but I just feel like I'm going to get some of these wrong because this season has been one of chaos. And so what are the chances that chaos doesn't happen in round 1? And in a season filled with chaos, there was 0 chaos in the first round. I mean, that was the big takeaway was all the teams that you think are better. And we'll talk in about why that is here in a little bit. But, as we'll go through the different games. But mean, just big picture, Vince, I think all 4 teams that I thought would win won. They just were a little bit more convincing than I thought. And we'll start with the first noon game, Vince.
Okay.
SMU, I thought as a team, played Penn State competitively, very competitively. Their quarterback killed them in this game. I mean, that was one of the worst, and I love the kid. He had a great year. I'm not trying to bang on Kevin Jennings at all. He's a big reason that they're here. Big reason they're here. But he was so bad early in that game. I mean, SMU took their first drive right down the field.
Yes.
And it's 4th and 1. And
so frustrating.
And if he just keeps running on that 4th and 1, he's got it. But okay, the guy's open, that make a better throw. If he keeps it or makes a better throw, that's a first down and goal situation, and he doesn't make it. And I think that play shook him.
Yeah.
I don't think he was ever the same after that. And the 2 pick sixes he threw, Vince, were terrible throws.
Awful.
And then it's 14-0. SMU's driving again on Penn State inside the 15-yard line, and he has a tipped pass interception where if that guy didn't tip it and pick it off, the safety coming downhill would have picked it and picked it off, and he might have scored. It was getting picked off by somebody.
Yep.
He was just shook, man. And it was unfortunate because, you look at him like, man, I thought SMU had a better defense than that. They do. Their defense didn't get dominated. Their offense did.
That's exactly right. And they allowed, obviously Penn State got 2 touchdowns without even having to step foot on the field with their offense. And, if SMU was going to win this game or be in this game, they needed Penn State's offense to be on the field. Yep. You know what I mean? They weren't. They didn't need to be. And then, they got their first offensive points because they were put in a great position by the 3rd interception.
Mm-hmm.
And then at that point, SMU was broken. I mean, it was 21-0. I mean, SMU was broken at that point. It was so, the rest of the game to me doesn't even really matter at that point. Right. Can I harken back to, the Arizona head coach? Penn State is still who I thought they were. You know what I mean? They're still who I thought they were. Yeah. But SMU just didn't take advantage. They gifted Penn State 3 touchdowns, and at that point, the game was over. And that was the problem.
I mean, Vince, Penn State's offense averaged 4.7 yards per carry. It's a little bit misleading because both of their starting running backs went for 6.4. But that was off of a couple chunky runs. Their quarterback went 13 of 22 for 127 yards, 5.8 yards per play. They had barely over 300 yards of offense. And that can be misleading if you're getting a bunch of short fields, but like their per play average wasn't impressive. The Penn State offense did okay. That game was about the big plays their defense made. And honestly, they weren't really like guys making plays. It wasn't like the pick 6 they had against Ohio State where the kid baited the quarterback and then stepped in front and picked. These were the SMU quarterback. Like the second pick 6, it's like there's not an SMU player around that linebacker that picked that pass off. Like just no one near him. He just hit him right in the chest. And you're like, dude, what are you doing there, buddy? And it was unfortunate because I thought the rest of the Penn State or the SMU team played well. I thought that, they had their receivers had some success in the game when they were getting the football. I thought their defense had success shutting Penn State down early, but eventually their defense was like, good Lord, man. Like, I don't know what we're supposed to do here. We're shutting them down. And eventually it's just they kind of wore them down a little bit, and it was unfortunate because I thought that game would be more competitive. I did have Penn State winning. I think 27-20 is what I thought the score would be. I think that was my prediction.
Oh,
that's what I thought it would be. And so, but it wasn't. It was over by the end, the middle of the second quarter. I mean, once Katron Allen busted that 25-yard run, broke a couple tackles, and it's like that's a ball game.
Right.
I really thought it was over the minute he had it. It was 14-0, and he threw that pick. I was like, they're done. That was their chance. That was their moment. If they would have scored a touchdown right there, that was their chance to get back in that football game. Right there was that 14-0. You're driving. Everything has gone wrong so far in this game. Everything has gone wrong for you in this game. You score there, it's a brand new ball game.
Yeah.
And they couldn't do it. You couldn't do it. It's kind of like the late drive that Indiana had. It's 14-0. They put that drive together. If Indiana could have punched a touchdown in there, maybe it's a little bit of a different game. But then get a field goal, and then Notre Dame goes down and gets their own field goal. And, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's going to be it was very disappointing, SMU. And I picked SMU to win. I picked them to win by a point. Like, that's where I was. It was kind of a 50-50 toss up for me, but I was like, I got to call for an upset in this particular round. And so that's the one that I called for. And the moment was just too big for him. It was too big for SMU, and it's unfortunate because
it was too big for Kevin Jennings.
And look, I said Riley Leonard was going to be the X factor in the Notre Dame game going in, and I think he was. Jennings was the X factor going into this game, and he was for all the wrong reasons. You know what I mean? Like, they weren't going to be able to beat Penn State unless he had a great game, and he had the complete opposite of a great game. I mean, he just didn't play well. I mean, the announcers were talking about a quarterback change at halftime. You know what I mean? Like, that's where it was. So it was not a good showing for SMU. I still think their head coach is a really good head coach. I think they're a good team. They're going to be active in the portal, and they're going to be active in NIL because of who they are in Dallas and the backers that they have and all of those different things. But hopefully they can take this and build on it because nobody expected that they were going to be here in the first place. And so they still kind of overachieved anyway. But, man, I expected more in this game. So that's kind of where I'm at with that. Let's move on to the second game of the day, Brian, and that was the Clemson-Texas game. And I guess probably the most competitive game of the four games that were played this weekend. I thought that Texas controlled the game the entire time, but Clemson wouldn't go away.
Right.
And again, you made a great point, way back when we started the show, was that Clemson has been here before. They have a seasoned head coach when it comes to the playoffs. They have, their traditions on Selection Sunday and, all of these different things. They've been here. They know what it feels like. And it was very obvious that as a program, they knew what it was like to be in a game like this. Now, I don't think they had the roster maybe to play in this game, but they still had the pedigree from a program standpoint. And it showed. They still didn't win, but it showed in the game.
Yeah, you got to give Clemson a lot of credit. They came to play. And they took that opening drive, Vince, right down the field and scored a touchdown. I mean, first drive of the game, they took 6.5 minutes, over 6.5 minutes off the clock.
Yeah, I was impressed.
Punched in the end zone. Texas answered with 3 straight, and Clemson was never back in it after that. And then they had their chances. I mean, they had some fourth down misses, some third down chances I thought they should have hit. But, you did have the one bad pick by Cade Klubnik, but then the defense helps you out and you turn it over on downs. And it got into a little bit of an ugly, they fumbled and Texas throws a pick. Just that second quarter was a little sloppy once it got to 21-7. But I thought the Clemson offense, I should say, maybe not Clemson as a team, Clemson's offense came to play.
Yeah.
Which again,
two games in a row, I was surprised with Cade and how he played.
Well, he played so bad last year, and he played so bad against Georgia in the opener that you kind of ignored how well he played in the regular season.
I did.
And it's understandable. He was not that good against Louisville. And you're just like, maybe he's not, but that he was great against South Carolina. I mean, he wasn't the one. He was very good against South Carolina. His team didn't help him out. He was great against SMU, and he was out. And he put this team on his shoulders for stretches of that game against Texas and made some phenomenal throws in this game. I mean, it's the best game of his career. And it says a lot about a kid to have his best game on this stage against the number one pass defense in the country. I mean, Texas had the number one pass defense in the country, I believe, coming in this game. It was either Texas or Ohio State, right? And they are not there now because Cade did a great job, and he just kind of ripped them up a little bit, Vince, and had a lot of success in that game against him. Threw for 336. Those young receivers had outstanding performances in this game. Antonio Williams had a great game. TJ Moore had a great game. Their tight end had some outstanding catches. But my dad and I were watching. He threw this corner route, and I still can't pronounce that. Brenning-Stool or whatever. Makes this great catch. But that's the only plays Cade Klubnik could have thrown that ball to complete it. It's just a gorgeous throw. I mean, he played great. He's the reason they were in it. Him and the receivers are the reason they're in it. The issue, however, is their defense continues to be a huge disappointment this season. Coach Sweeney is going to have to reevaluate that. And Bill Bender talked about this, and I talked about this on Saturday or on Thursday, is when you look at Clemson's rush defense this year, it wasn't very good at a lot of times, but in most of those games, it was against a mobile quarterback. Well, Texas doesn't have a mobile quarterback, and they still ran the ball all over Clemson. I mean, people love to do this. Well, if you take away Jadon Blue's 77-yard touchdown run, they still have over 200 yards rushing. They had two guys who went over 100 yards in the game. They got dominated on defense. And then when they needed to make stops in the secondary, they couldn't make them. They had some, just some pass interference penalties. We're like, dude, that's such football 101. You can't grab a guy right here and yank. Like, dude, like you're there. You're in great position. Finish the playoff. Their defense has really been their problem against good teams this year. And like they played great for 3.5 quarters against South Carolina. Well, good. And then you give up that final drive. And every time the offense got them back in the game, the defense would just boom. Like they make it 31-24. What does the defense do? You give up a 77-yard touchdown run ball game. Their defense is a huge problem. Texas's offensive line looks a whole lot different when they've got Kelvin Banks in the lineup. We saw that. But they've got a lot of issues on defense that they're going to have to fix. And Wes Goodwin's just not the answer. There's too much talent on that Clemson defensive line for them to be this mediocre, in my opinion. That was my big takeaway. I thought Texas bounced back well from the loss to Georgia. I didn't see any lingering after effects from that mentality-wise. I thought they came out and played hard. I thought them answering that first Clemson score was huge for them. I think they needed that because it's kind of like you lose that game that you just played. This team that you're supposed to blow out comes in and goes right down the field, 12 plays, 75 yards. And what I loved about it is they literally said, I'll see your 12 play, 75-yard drive, and I will have one of our own. It's literally 12 play, 75 yards. So like over 12 minutes of the game was gone after each team's first possession. Almost 13 minutes was off the clock. Right? I mean, so I think it's going to be a slow, grinded out game. And then, of course, after that, Texas offense got going. But I thought Clemson's offense battled. I thought Clemson's defense was overwhelmed. And Texas's run game was very good. I thought this was I think Sark knew he needed to get his O-line's confidence back, and he did that in this game.
You're not kidding.
He did that in this game.
Look, I have never, at least, I will admittedly say I have not watched every Texas game this year, but they ran the ball better than they've run the ball all season. I mean, they ran the ball with some authority
against a quality opponent. Yeah,
I mean, they ran the ball with authority in this game, and they put the game away with their run game. Like all the conversation going into this game was Quinn Ewers, bench him to put in the Manning kid, all this difference. It was all about the quarterback. Well, you know what? In this game, all the quarterback had to do was turn around and hand the ball off because they were running the ball with some authority and they dominated the trenches offensively. Like that's where that game ended, unfortunately for Clemson. And again, I give Clemson all the flowers that they deserve because they did what they needed to do to get into the playoff and try to make a playoff run, all those different things. And on the strength of their program, they were there and they weren't daunted by the task. But just Texas is a better football team, and they just physically beat Clemson's defense. Yeah. in my opinion. That's where it came from.
That's what a playoff game is supposed to look like, though.
Yeah,
agreed. Good football teams where the higher seeded team is just better.
Yeah,
but the other team who is not as good, but battled their way in, competes. That's what a playoff game is supposed to look.
Yeah, 100%.
A first round playoff game is supposed to look.
Yeah, right. Let's spin it forward to the night game.
That is not what a playoff game is supposed to look like.
No. Which I think the reason it was the night game, right, was because, it's the Big Ten, it's the SEC.
It was the marquee matchup of the first round. I mean, if Clemson was better, that would have been the marquee matchup. But we all looked at Clemson and was like, they're not going to compete with Texas. And
They're the 12. They backed into it.
They didn't. They backed into it in the sense that they needed to win their conference title. I mean, they're the one team that earned it, right? They're the one team in the first round that earned their right to the playoff by an automatic bid, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Agreed.
But they needed that to get in because they weren't getting in otherwise. You know what I mean? Like
exactly.
And they competed and all that, but like Tennessee just was. There was no team that was more overwhelmed by the environment than Tennessee was. Like I said, SMU's quarterback was overwhelmed by the moment. Tennessee's football team was overwhelmed
the whole program.
by them. And the only kid that I thought battled was the quarterback. Now he's got a long way to go when it comes to reading a defense and timing and decision making and all that. He's still a young kid in that regard, but Nico played his tail off. I mean, and he competed, but he didn't get a lot of help.
Oh man, he was running for his life his
whole night, man. And their defense, like. As I said before, Vince, I'm not surprised that Tennessee's offense struggled to move the ball on Ohio State. I said it before the game. This is not a very good Tennessee offense. They're only averaging what they're averaging because they scored like 60 points a game in the first 3 games against like, what was it? It was like Chattanooga, NC State, who stinks. I said before the season they were going to be overrated. They were overrated. And then Kent State, who literally is the worst FBS football team in the country. They went 0-12 this year, and their closest game was a 2-point home loss to Ball State, who fired their coach, and they lost it by 6 at home to a Division I AA team.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, that's who they destroyed. And then after that, Tennessee, we talked about this, 25 against Oklahoma, 14 against Arkansas, 23 against Florida in overtime, by the way. 24 against Bama, 28 against Kentucky, 33 against a Mississippi State team whose defense is really bad and gives up 34. Like their 33 was below Mississippi State's season average allowed. 17 against Georgia, scored 56 against UTEP. Again, a team that stinks, a team that went 2-10 this year and gave up 32 points a game. And then they scored 36 against Vanderbilt, but they spotted Vanderbilt a 17-0 lead. You're not going to do that to Ohio State and come back. And that's exactly what they did. What surprised me, Vince, was how their defense got absolutely annihilated by Ohio State. I mean, they just got absolutely destroyed by Ohio State's offense. And part of that is great scheme, but Will Howard, who I'm not a fan of, that, threw some dimes in this game. That first touchdown pass, Jeremiah Smith, set the tone for this game. Like Will Howard was feeling it against Tennessee.
Yeah, look, I'm not a Will Howard fan, but
you got to give credit where
he probably played his best game of the year.
He was great.
I mean, he was really, really good.
He was great.
He was. I mean, and he came out ready for that game. I mean, I'm a very emotional person when it comes to some of my likes and dislikes with teams and certain players and some things like that. But I will tip my cap when I see a well-played game or whatever. And that was
excellence is excellence, Vince. I don't care whatever you think about a kid coming into a game. Excellence. Hey, look, Timmy Smith never had a good game before or after Super Bowl 22, but that game he was brilliant. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
And you could see it from early on. You could see Will Howard is feeling it early on, and you could see the game plan was to have Will Howard come out and go after him. And look, we said before the game, I've been saying it all year, Vince, SEC secondaries are not good this year outside of Texas. There just aren't a lot of good secondaries in the SEC that are good this year. Georgia's hasn't been very good. LSU stinks. Ole Miss's is solid. That's probably the best of all those teams. Tennessee's isn't very good, but I didn't think it was going to be like this. I thought Ohio State was going to have some success throwing the football. I thought they'd win like 27-20, 24-21. Like I thought it'd be that kind of game where they'd hit a couple big throws, but I did not see this coming where they just torch them. And if it wasn't for them kind of going away from what worked in the first quarter, in the second quarter, it might have been worse. And they kind of let Tennessee crawl back in a little bit, but Ohio State came out that third quarter, Vince, and said, nope, this ain't happening. Y'all are not coming back in this game. We're going to absolutely steamroll you. And that's what they did. I mean, they started great in the first quarter, and they were great coming out of halftime.
Yeah.
And that game was over very early. I mean, forced a quick punt by Tennessee. That's the thing, Vince, is like they scored to make it 21-10, went on a nice long drive, punched it in at the end, 21-10, and then you start with the ball in the second half. It's like, okay, if they go down and score, this could get real interesting. and Ohio State shut them down, and then their offense went right down the field.
Yeah.
And again, went right back to Will Howard. But they also, Jeremiah Smith, but they also had some complimentary players step up in this game, Vince. I mean, yes, Jeremiah Smith went off and Emeka went off, but G. Scott had some really big catches in this game. Travion was good out of the backfield. He had one of his best games. He had 134 yards of offense and 2 touchdowns. Quinshon Judkins was typical Quinshon Judkins. He grinds out a couple yards, and he's just not that guy. But a couple short yardage touchdowns. But like their dudes played like dudes. Yeah. Jeremiah was a dude. Emeka was a dude. Travion was a dude. And Will Howard played the game of his career. I mean,
look, if they play this way in the next round,
they could beat Oregon.
Oregon's in trouble.
Look. Yeah, I get you. Yeah.
I think they'll
win.
We're going to talk about all this obviously later on, but like I think Penn State showed some cracks in the Oregon armor a little bit that I think Ohio State could take advantage of. I'll just say that. Yeah. But we'll get to those kind of games.
Yeah, but this is what everybody thought Ohio State was going to look like.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think
now, is this the beginning of things to come, or was this sort of just they were feeling it and
they were at home and all of those things? Yeah, I totally get that.
And I don't ever want to hear an Ohio State fan talk to a Notre Dame fan again about how Notre Dame Stadium gets overrun by opposing fans ever again. This was worse than Nebraska 2000. It was worse than that. I mean, that was wild how many Tennessee fans. But you know what Ohio State's players did? Well, we're not going to let them cheer about anything.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
nothing.
Yeah,
and that was without a doubt the most impressive performance that we saw in the playoff. Now, and we're going to talk about what all this means here next, Vince. But that was the most impressive. Here's how I'd rank the performance as far as just kind of dominance. I would say I'd go Ohio State had the most dominant performance, no question.
I agree.
I think Notre Dame was next. I think Penn State was next, and Penn State was dominant on one side of the ball. The difference between Notre Dame and Ohio State and Penn State is Notre Dame and Ohio State dominated on both sides of the ball.
Yep.
Penn State did not play very well on offense. Their defense, they didn't need to. And then Texas was the least dominant, but that's because their opponent played the best.
Yeah.
Like Clemson played really well. I mean, again, like I said, some of the throws that they beat that Texas secondary on were just, I don't know what you're supposed to do about that.
Yeah.
Like that was just a great throw and catch by the quarterback. And that's what there were some throws that Cade made in that game where if you're Coach Kwiatkowski, the D coordinator at Texas, you're just kind of tipping your cap to Cade and being like, I don't know what to do about that. You know what I mean? Like it just was a great play. So their level of dominance was lower, but I think they, as a team, still played well. Texas did, but just level of dominance, I put them fourth in that one.
Yeah, for sure. Now it's interesting now that you kind of take a step. Okay, here's the next level, right? And all the favorites. It was all chalk this weekend, right? It was all chalk. Now you've got a situation where I think you could make a case where all four underdogs by seed. Okay, I'm going by seed. I'm not going by Vegas right now, but underdogs by seed could win this next round. Like it's kind of wild the way this thing sets up.
Well, what it showed was, Vince, and this is going to segue into what I really want to talk about here.
Okay.
Which is what we saw in this game is there's some teams at the top that are just way better than everybody else. And I said it before the playoffs. There's 5 teams that I think have a shot to win a championship. And I'll just go in order of their seed. Oregon, Georgia, Texas, Notre Dame, Ohio State. Those are the 5 that I think can win it all.
Okay.
What?
No, when you said Penn State, I was
like, what? No,
I was like breaks.
Yeah, Ohio State, because I was going to order seed. No, Notre Dame, and then Ohio State. Those are the 5 that I think have a shot to win it all. Like can win 3-4 games. Obviously, the higher seeds only got to win 3. Those teams I think are capable of winning a championship. And then I think Penn State's next, and then there's a drop off the other teams that were in the playoff.
That's fair.
There just is. And what we saw now. We'll talk about what the media talked about, or I shouldn't even say media, what the ESPN said, because there was a lot of – I was surprised at how many national media were crushing ESPN all weekend. And, like, there's a guy from On3, Ari Weiserman. Never really heard of him before. I've watched a couple podcasts he's done with Andy Staples. And fair guy. Actually ate dinner right beside Ange and I at the game, by the way. He was being real polite. Like he grabbed his food and there wasn't a place, and so he was eating. And so Angela and I moved down and, hey, go ahead here. And he's very polite. But he was going at ESPN and people in the SEC people talking about this. But here's what you saw in the first round was the double-edged sword of the 12-team playoff. Because there has never been and likely will never be 12 teams capable of winning a championship. And
Agreed.
if there ever is a year where there is 12, it's because the rules of the game have torn everybody down to where there's just 12 mediocre football teams in the playoffs.
Right.
There never will be and never has been, unless they ruin the game, more than at the most 6 or 7 teams. Very rare occasion, an 8th team that can truly compete for a championship. If you and I went back over time, I'm pretty sure there's years we could find 8 teams capable of winning a championship.
Sure.
There's never going to be more than that. There's definitely never going to be 12. This year, I think there's 5. And so what this 12-team playoff has done is it has accomplished its mission of making a more entertaining and engaging regular season.
Sure.
I got that wrong. I thought it was going to cheapen the regular season by saying, well, wins and losses don't matter. The way the committee chose the 12 teams made it matter. If they would have put in a bunch of 3-loss SEC teams, it would have cheapened the regular season. Flat out. But the point is there was a lot of teams going into those final weekends that had a shot to play. Bama didn't deserve to be in. Why? Because of the late November win against lost to Oklahoma. Had they won that game, they would have been able to play themselves in, even though in past years they're done after losing to Vanderbilt.
I think they're in. If they beat Oklahoma, I think
they're in.
They make
and
it
they should have been in.
Yeah.
They would have deserved to be in.
Correct.
10-2 Alabama is more deserving of SMU and would have been more deserving of an 11-1 Indiana team, in my opinion.
Yeah, sure.
Because they
you
can't lose
to
by
Oklahoma.
21 points to a crap. Oh, you can't lose by 21 points to anybody in the regular season, unless it's your only loss.
Right.
You can't lose to a 6-6 team who is only 6-6 because they beat you. Right. I mean, let's be honest about that as well.
Yeah.
If you beat them, they're not bowl eligible. And so you can't lose to them by 21 points. You can't get beat by a 6-6 Vanderbilt team who's only bowl eligible because they beat you in a game you never led and get in. That cheapens the regular season. And I'll talk about the whole strength of schedule bull crap here in a second. But when you expand to 12 teams, the counter to that is you're going to have some first round mismatches. That's number one. That's going to keep happening. It's not possible to just have it. Now, there's going to be some years where there's 4 competitive games, but it's going to be rare. I thought this might be a year where it would actually be 4 somewhat competitive games. The only game that I predicted to be a double-digit loss, Vince, was the only game I got right from a margin stand. Actually, I was close on a couple. I predicted Notre Dame to win by 11 and won by 10, but I thought it'd be a much closer game than it actually was. Like Notre Dame only won by 10, but you and I both know it was not a close game.
Right.
I thought it'd be kind of like the Louisville game where Notre Dame scored last to make it 20, because I thought Indiana would be able to have a little bit more success on offense, and I didn't think Notre Dame was going to have quite as much early success against that Indiana defense. Just they were even better than I thought they were going to be. And then I got the Texas Clemson score right, meaning from a spread standpoint. I predicted 31-17. It was 38-24. The other 2 games I really thought it was going to be closer, Vince, but it wasn't. And this is what, this hand wringing of like the SEC and ESPN, they're learning the wrong message, the wrong lesson. They're like, see, this is why Bama should have been in. And I've seen all this crap from Bama fans and SEC homers. Well, Bama wouldn't have lost. Like, guys, Bama lost in November with a chance to get into the playoff by 21 to a team that would get smoked by 11 other teams in the playoff, including Indiana, including SMU, including Clemson. All those teams would smoke Oklahoma. Smoke them. Because what happened to Oklahoma the week after they beat Alabama? LSU smoked them by 20. What happened to them, every time they played a decent team all year? Mississippi beat them by double digits. South Carolina beat them by 24, 26. Texas beat them by 31. Tennessee beat them by 10. Right? The only quote-unquote good team that played a close game was a Missouri team who's super overrated. So, no, Bama would have got smoked by Notre Dame, and they might have got smoked by more because I think Notre Dame would have been even more fired up to play against Bama than they would have against Indiana,
right.
if I'm being honest about it. But you know what that is? That's a guess because we don't know how those teams would have performed. But they didn't belong because they got smoked late in the year with a chance to play for it. But this is what's going to happen. But here's the thing that bothers me about it, Vince. It's just the lazy talking points because let's go back to past college football playoff performances. And let's go to the first ever college football playoff where it was the top 4 teams. The first round game was competitive between Alabama and Ohio State. Number 2 Oregon beat number 3 Florida State 59-20. The championship game, Ohio State beat Oregon 42-20, 14 playoff. The next year, top 4 teams. Clemson beat Oklahoma 37-17. Alabama, number 2, beat Michigan State, number 3, 38-0. 2016, number 1 Alabama beats number 4 Washington 24-7 in a game that Washington never had a chance to win. And this other game, number 2 Clemson beat number 3 Ohio State 31-0. The next year, you had closer games. Alabama beat Clemson 24-6, but the Georgia-Oklahoma game was close, and the Alabama-Georgia game was close. That's the anomaly. 2018, number 1 Alabama beats number 4 Oklahoma by 11 in the game that I believe Oklahoma scored last. Then number 2 Clemson beat number 3 Notre Dame by 27. Championship game, Clemson beats Alabama by 28. No competitive games that year. The next year, number 1 LSU beats number 4 Oklahoma 63-28. And then number 1 Clemson beat number 3 LSU 42-25 in the championship game. The next year, first round, Alabama beats Notre Dame 31-14 in the game that Notre Dame scored last. It was not that close. And then Ohio State beat Clemson 49-28, a 17 and a 21-point spread. And in the title game, number 1 Alabama beat number 3 Ohio State 52-24. 2021, Bama beats Cincinnati 27-6. Georgia beats Michigan 34-11. Georgia beats Alabama by 15. Not a single game in that postseason decided by fewer than 15 points. The next year, Georgia, Ohio State play a great game. TCU, Michigan play great games. Championship game is 65-7. The next year, 2023, all close games in the semifinals. Championship game is a blowout. We have literally seen this all but 1 year when you had 4 teams in. And to act like, well, this is why Indiana didn't belong. Okay, so did Bama not belong in 2018 when they got smoked by Clemson? Of course they did. That's a stupid. The problem you clowns have is that SEC teams didn't get in, and that it's not traditional teams. It's Indiana and SMU, not Alabama and Ole Miss. Because if it was Alabama and Ole Miss, and Notre Dame did to Bama what they did to Indiana, they'd be like, "Oh, it's an impressive performance by Notre Dame," right? Maybe some would. But they also might be like, well, Bama's not that good anyway, blah, 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 blah. And they would be saying the same crap about if Bama would have got in over Indiana and Notre Dame smoked them. Well, see, this is why Indiana really got screwed over and Indiana should have been in because they'd have been more competitive against Notre Dame than Alabama was. It's nonsense. It's clickbait. It's laziness. I saw Kirk Herbstreit talking about that. You know, and the whole thing is, this is why you got to pay more attention to strength of schedule. This is why strength of schedule matters. SEC so hard, and those people didn't say, almost cussed, Vince. Almost did it, almost cussed. Not gonna. They were silent while they watched Tennessee get destroyed by Ohio State. And let me remind y'all, all y'all SEC clowns out there talking about Alabama should have been in, Ole Miss, and South Carolina should have been in. Who had the highest strength of schedule of the teams that lost on Saturday? Tennessee, number 7 strength of schedule in all of college football. They got destroyed by Ohio State, who wasn't in the top 10 in strength of schedule. SMU and Indiana. Notre Dame dominated Indiana. Indiana had a higher strength of schedule than Notre Dame. SMU had a higher strength of schedule than Notre Dame. Right? If you look at the ESPN metrics, they did. That's where it was. So what did strength of schedule tell us about these games on Saturday? Jack, nothing. Nothing. They didn't tell us anything about strength of schedule. because the teams that looked the best are the teams that outside of Ohio State didn't have overly impressive strength of schedule. Ohio State was, I think, top 20 in strength of schedule. 18th. Penn State was 27th in strength of schedule. Indiana was only 31st. SMU was, I think, 34th. There was only a 7-point difference or 7-spot difference in strength of schedule between Penn State and SMU, and they got smoked. Why? Because it's not about the strength of schedule. It's those teams didn't belong in. And you're going to talk about, well, SEC teams would have fared better. Oh, really? How'd that work out for Tennessee, who beat Bama, who also beat Vanderbilt, who beat Bama, who also beat Tennessee or Oklahoma by 10, who beat Bama? So tell me how you think Bama would have been better, right? Tennessee beat all 3 teams involved in this conversation with Bama. They beat Bama, they beat Oklahoma, they beat Vanderbilt, and they beat those last 2 teams by double digits. So all of a sudden I'm supposed to think that Alabama would have been more competitive? No, Vince, you know what would have happened if Alabama would have been in the playoff? Same dang thing that happened to Indiana. Mm-hmm. Same dang thing that happened to SMU. Same dang thing that happened to Tennessee. Because the best teams in the country won this weekend. That's what happened. And if you'd have given me some garbage 3-loss team from the SEC who couldn't get in because they lost to a 4-8 Kentucky team, I'm looking at you, Lane Kiffin. You've been real silent on Twitter since you got embarrassed watching Tennessee get their behinds kicked, right? Real quiet now after running your mouth about Indiana. You know what? At least Indiana, hey, look, Vince, I don't know if Indiana could have beat Georgia, but here's what I know. They didn't lose to any 4-8 teams. Just saying, they didn't lose to a team like Florida, 7-5 team, right? Maybe if you don't lose to teams in your league that suck, you might have got in and had a chance to prove yourself. But you choked when you had a chance to get in, Alabama, and you got your butts kicked by Oklahoma, a mediocre Big 12 team that you guys got in the transfer portal this offseason. You know what I'm saying? Like, somebody said this, it's hilarious that the best team in the SEC this year, if Notre Dame beats Georgia, there's a good chance the only SEC team left is a team that they got from the transfer portal this offseason. I thought that was great. So that transfer portal thing is not my line. But that's the whole thing, Vince, is it's freaking lazy. And I'm so sick of the lazy rants from ESPN. I'm so sick of Kirk Herbstreit and his lazy takes. Lazy takes. You know better, Kirk. You know better. And I also was pissed off watching the Ohio State game because the whole time they're just talking about how good Ohio State is. And they are. But that's exactly what they should have been saying during the Notre Dame game. You and I were walking out in the last 5 minutes of the game. And then after the game, and all they kept talking about is how bad Indiana was. They didn't belong here. Not a word. It took 5 minutes. We left the stadium till the time we got in the car before the words Notre Dame came out of Sean McDonough's mouth.
Right.
I'm like, did we watch the same freaking game?
Like, that was embarrassing. Maybe you didn't look good because of who they played.
Exactly.
Huh.
Tennessee doesn't look good because of how good Ohio State is. But when Indiana doesn't look good, SMU doesn't look good, it's because they didn't belong. It's like people are seeing through your crap narratives, and even national media people outside of ESPN are calling them out now. Nicole Auerbach is crushing them on Twitter. Ari Weisserman, I think it's Weisserman. Maybe it's Wasserman. I'm not sure of his name. I should look that up. That's disrespectful to not get the guy's name up if I'm going to sit here and talk about him on the show. I'm going to look his name up here real quick. But I think he works for On3. Ari Wasserman. That's what his name is. He is crushing those people on Twitter right now. Rightfully so. And it's like, look, do you want to say Indiana is not a team that can compete for a championship? Fine. They're not. We knew that. But don't try to tell me that Bama is. Right? Don't try to give me don't try to hand me a poop sandwich and try to tell me it's roast beef. I know what it is. It's trash. It doesn't belong. The name might belong for TV ratings, but they didn't belong because there's only 5 or 6 teams that can compete for a championship on an annual basis. And I'm so happy to see more and more people going after them in the national media because nobody cares what I think. Except Notre Dame fans, nobody cares what I think. It's nice that people with bigger voices are starting to go after them because they're ruining it. And I don't want to hear Joel Klatt going after him either because his lazy butt was also giving us some crap takes this week too about Notre Dame. His takes about Notre Dame are garbage. But at least Joel Klatt's jumping on the bandwagon of Let me it's the cool thing now to push back on these guys. Let me go at Lane Kiffin now. It's lazy. It's lazy. So I'm tired of ESPN's garbage, of the laziness. And I mean, even Nick Saban's fallen into it with some of his lazy takes the last few weeks. I got to watch Pat McAfee, clown himself every week and pick Indiana to win. Like, get out of here with that stuff. And I was so happy watching and I know it's kind of been fun, but I liked it watching Shane Gillis kind of clown them all.
No, it was great.
I didn't know who Shane Gillis was until this year. And it was like, he's a Notre Dame fan. So I've watched some of his comedies. Really funny. But he was clowning them, and again, I think he meant it in fun. But for me, he did,
but at the same time, he still said it, which is
right.
fantastic.
Alabama Jones, and
like it was.
Did you see when Saban said when he's talking about integrity? Did you see Saban do the air quotes when he's like, "I believe in integrity," and he went like this? I think just naturally he did air quotes. Did you see that?
Oh, yeah,
Go watch it again. He gave air quotes when he said I believe in integrity. He gave air quotes. It was freaking awesome.
Well, because he got called out for paying players before you could pay players. It was fantastic.
Right.
It was great. It was.
But
great.
you all sit here and talk about how Indiana was going to give Notre Dame a game, and they're going to do this, they're going to do that, and Pat McAfee picks Indiana to win that game, and then when Notre Dame smokes them, y'all are like, they didn't belong here, they didn't deserve to be
right.
here.
How quickly they turn. I mean, there was a lot look, the popular pick over the weekend, or going into the weekend, was Notre Dame to lose to IU. It's a very popular upset pick. Yeah. It's a very popular upset pick. And, 10 minutes into that game, people are like, oh.
As soon as Jeremiah Love cleared the end, they're like, nope, I got that
that's
one
not
wrong.
going to happen. Yeah. I mean, it's comedy.
But even the ones that picked Notre Dame were like, it's going to be close and this is going to
Oh, yeah.
And look, I'm okay with that because I think Indiana's a good football team. Right? I mean, it's like, and that's what frustrates me, man, is I just get so sick and tired of these lazy narratives that ESPN keeps pushing on the college football world. And they have pull. They do. They're a big reason why we're in the predicaments that we're in is because of ESPN. And I'm just glad more and more people are starting to go after them. And because what they did to Indiana Friday night was incredibly disrespectful and lazy. What they did to SMU and Clemson, more so SMU, was disrespectful and lazy. And they're acting like these teams got like strength of schedules in the 90s and whatnot. And not even saying a word about the fact that like all week I'm waiting on somebody to say, hey, Indiana didn't beat a ranked team and SMU didn't beat a ranked team. And I'm saying, are we going to just ignore the fact that neither did Texas? We're just going to ignore that? You know what I mean? Well, Bama beat X number of ranked teams. Well, first of all, Missouri shouldn't be ranked. Get the F out of here with Missouri being in the top 25.
Seriously.
First of all. Second of all, I don't care that you beat it. It's like you can't give me – because, again, that's about perception. Well, they beat Georgia. Okay, cool. Northern Illinois beat Notre Dame. Vanderbilt beat Bama. Oklahoma beat Bama. Kentucky beat Ole Miss. Right? Florida beat Ole Miss. I'm trying to think through some of the teams. Michigan, who's not very good, beat Ohio State. Tennessee lost to Arkansas. I mean, pointing to that one great ranked win doesn't tell me anything because there's a lot of teams that have weird ranked wins this year. There's a lot of teams that have that. Wow, you lost. That's the team you lost to? Oklahoma beat Bama. Vandy beat Bama. There's a lot of good wins from bad teams. But the best teams, they may have had that one loss, but you know what they didn't do? They didn't do it multiple times, Bama. Notre Dame lost Northern Illinois. Terrible loss. They didn't lose that. They didn't do that two more times.
Right.
Indiana didn't play anybody. They played teams as good or better than freaking Oklahoma and Vanderbilt and Kentucky. I promise you that. And they smoked all of them.
Well, according to Nick Saban, the Notre Dame didn't win by a big enough margin. They don't blow teams out. He said that.
Did he say that?
They don't blow teams. Notre Dame doesn't blow teams out.
But that's what's sad. Is like that's one of the greatest coaches ever to do this, who's just not doing his homework. Right.
Just look at the schedule and the results. You don't even have to watch the film.
Exactly. Just like take 2 minutes to look at a stat sheet. And here's Notre Dame's margin of victory this year, Vince, so they don't win by enough. Here's their margins of victory this year. 10, 59, 25, 7, 42, 18, 37, 49, 21, 35, 14, 10. Notre Dame has 12 wins this year. 11 of them have been by double digits.
And the one that's left over was a score late.
Right.
To make it a one-score game.
Correct. A game they led by double digits for over half the game.
Exactly. So,
it's just like I'm so tired of these just incredibly lazy takes. I mean, oh my gosh. So lazy. Alabama, the year that they won their first title, had 3 games decided in the regular season by less than 10 points. And then there's like, this other dude at ESPN, I don't even know who said it. I was watching one of the games, and it might have been the Penn State game. It was whoever's doing the Texas game, Clemson game. They showed Colt McCoy, and he's like, our Greg McElroy outdueled Colt McCoy for that. And I'm like, out what? It was 6-0, and Colt got knocked out of the game. They were going right down the field on Alabama. Greg McElroy went 6 of 11 for 58 yards. Like, do you guys do no homework whatsoever? You just say whatever dumb thing comes out of your mouth because no one's going to fact check. He outdueled Colt McCoy. It was 6-0 when Colt left the game. Dude passed for 58 yards. 58 yards. But you got to be able to throw to win a championship unless you're Bama. Notre Dame's got to throw for 300. They can't win. Keep winning week after week. Yeah, but they got to throw better. They just won another game by 30. Yeah, but they got to throw better. When they get to the playoff, they'll be able to do that. Well, I just did that in the freaking playoff too. Well, you got to throw to win championship unless you're Nick Saban in Alabama. You know what I mean? It's like it's just so lazy. It's like, and I didn't have to look that up. I just knew from 15 years ago. Well, that's the dumbest thing I've heard in a long time. And that's saying something for ESPN because they see a lot of dumb things. And that's the problem. There's too many games on TV. They have too many announcers who just don't know what they're doing.
Right.
And some of their good ones, like Sean McDonough. I used to love listening to Sean McDonough. I don't know what's happened to him, but he's had terrible takes this year. It's like, are you getting the memos? Or have you just all just have this ridiculous group think now that you all just repeat the same crap? Joe Tessitore, I used to like Joe Tessitore. He's a joke now. It's just like you listen to games, you're like, what? Are you watching the same effing game I'm watching? Because I don't think you are. Are you sure you're talking about the right team? Because what you're talking about has nothing to do with what I'm talking about. So that's the big thing for me, Vince, is I'm just fired up about that because they're cheating the kids and the teams that earned it. Indiana freaking earned the right to be on the playoff because of what they did on the field, because they didn't choke against teams like Oklahoma and Vanderbilt. And you cheated them that because you want to drive your stupid agenda. And then when Ohio State blows out Tennessee, oh, man, the Buckeyes are so good. Poor Tennessee. If Tennessee would have played any of those other teams, they would have won. But they just ran into a buzzsaw. They did. It's the most honest thing you guys said all week was that they ran into a buzzsaw. You cheated those kids who earned the right to be there by disrespecting them the way you did because you're too lazy to come up with something original or because you're too big of a pussy to push back on your bosses who basically make you say, we're going to push the SEC agenda instead of being honest. I'm sick of it. Sorry about the bad word at the end. I'm just sick of it because you're cheating the game and you're cheating these kids who earn the right to be there. Because you don't know football. Find another job because you suck at what you do. Rant over.
Impressive. I look. Can I just say that I have sat through many a Brian rant over my tenure? That's number one right there, man. That was some good stuff. You were ready. You were locked and loaded for that one.
I agree. Those kids earned more respect for what they did this season.
Yeah,
Indiana had a historic season.
Yeah.
They didn't choke against 6-6 teams, and you disrespected what they did. You took a great story and you pissed on it with some laziness. All because you don't want to respect Notre Dame or because you want to pump up some sorry SEC team that you pay a ton of money to, who you need to be good for business reasons. Where's your integrity? You have none. And Joel Klatt, sit down and shut up because you don't either trying to pretend like every Big Ten team is good because you have that network now. Sit down and shut up because you picked Indiana to win. So you stay out of this conversation. Let the grown-ups handle this one. I thought I was done.
Oh, it's fantastic. Well, folks, there's more to come. We've got all kinds of shows prepped and prepared, and
chats too.
Oh yeah, we do have some super chats to get to, but before we do, just make sure everybody look. We're going to be talking about the college football playoff and Notre Dame and Georgia and all of that. This is our wrap up of the weekend, and then now we move on to what is going to happen. And so make sure you guys stay locked in because there's going to be a lot of
all
good
with
stuff.
integrity.
No, we're not going to use the air quotes for integrity. We will do it with integrity.
Sorry. I just thought that was the new thing now.
Oh, okay.
When we say I believe in integrity, we do that. Sorry.
All right, let's get to some of these super chats here, Brian, before we get out.
I got to pull this one up from Bleed974, and I asked, was this a mistake? And he said, no, it was not.
Did you
remember
really?
that one time we had somebody give a $500 super chat, and it was by accident? And so we gave them some of their money back. But yeah, this one was not by accident, man. So wow. This is awesome. I appreciate you very, very much.
Holy smokes. I'll read it here. So from Blee974, thank you so much for the super chat. Should have $273. Should have been the score. Christmas bonus for the bonus content with the extra games. You guys are amazing.
Blee, thank you so much, man.
You're amazing, Blee. Thank you very much. Thank you. That is so freaking awesome.
Yeah.
Miles Whitaker with a big super chat as well. The crowd was phenomenal. As far as my eyes could see, everyone stood the entire game. That's the report I've gotten from all the people that I know that went to the game. Like I said, my father-in-law and my son were sitting together, and my son told me, he's like, look, he goes, we were standing the entire time. He goes, TV timeouts. He goes, Papa would sit down. He goes, but as soon as the game was back on, he was back up. I was like, all right, that's my guy.
That's awesome.
So yeah, I mean, everybody was standing up. So that is fantastic.
Crowd was great, man. I mean, it was.
I don't
know about the standing thing because I didn't pay attention to that. But like, just they were just so locked in on every play. They were so loud. And there was a lot of national people that were talking about just the environment. And that's the one thing that I will give. Sort of ESPN's is kind of like tooting their own horn to a degree, but they did talk about how great the environment was on Friday night. How that being at Notre Dame, being in South Bend at that stadium, was the perfect way to kick off this new thing that we have. Like, you're going to have it on the campus of the most historic school and program in history of college football. That's where it needed to be, and so that was the only okay, we've praised Notre Dame enough.
Yeah, that's enough. We'll praise the crowd. That's it.
Yeah. It's like Bill Bender said something this week, and he said that he thinks this is the game where the national people start to pay more attention to Jeremiah Love. And I'm like, isn't that ridiculous that it would take a playoff game before people nationally start recognizing how good freaking Jeremiah Love is? If they were doing their freaking jobs during the season, he'd be getting a lot more conversation. So, yeah.
I said it was going to be a coming out party for Jeremiah Love, and it's a sad state of affairs that was the case. But I still think it
shouldn't have to be.
It shouldn't have to be. But but it was. I mean, how many times have you seen that highlight of him going 98? You know what I mean? Like, it was definitely a coming out party, and he deserves
longest run in playoff history.
Correct, by a lot, actually.
Jeremiah Love, Vince, has rushed for over 100 yards now 5 times this year. He did it on 10, 12, 16, 7, and 8 carries. Yeah. Yeah. I was like, well, you get to the playoff, your yards per carry average is not going to go up. His did.
Right.
He's now at 7.4.
That's nuts.
Yeah.
Nuts. Got a super chat here from James Costanzo. Thank you very much for the super chat. Shout out to Shane Gillis, ripping Saban and the SEC on game day.
I can't see the picture, but I think this is the guy that Jimmy, who was helped us with the tailgate this weekend. So Jimmy actually bought 2 joy slot passes, and then we had ours. Okay. And so that's why we had the 2 cars set up. We had the space in between because we actually bought that. He actually bought an extra pass so we could set up all the food in there. So, man, huge shout out to Jimmy. If that's who it is, his name's Jimmy Costanzo. So I assume it's the same one, but appreciate you for that very much, man. But yeah, I loved it. I mean, again, he was doing it all in good fun. I mean, you could tell, but you could tell Saban was a little pissed though. Well, Saban did not take it as a joke. He was pissed. You could just tell he was not happy.
Don't say, stupid comments deserve stupid answers. That's how that works. Sorry, man.
I also loved how he was going at Curt Cignetti. He's like just ripping Curt Cignetti for being out there when the players were in the locker room, just crushing Curt Cignetti for it. He's like, Notre Dame by 1 million. I freaking loved that. That was awesome. That was absolutely awesome. I'll read this one, Vince, from Daniel Flagstad. Thank you so much for this one, Dan. He says, loved chatting with your dad. Go Irish. Daniel, we appreciate you, man, so much. But my dad had such a blast. He loves talking now. You guys, that's where I got it from, right? My dad loves talking. And like he likes talking in crowds like that. He would not like doing something like this, but I took it to another level. But my dad's one of those people, Vince, that he's never met a stranger. You know what I mean? Like he'll meet you and just talk with. He doesn't care where you're from, what that's just kind of who my dad is. And so that's why he loves to, like, my mom likes to serve. She likes to serve people. She likes to do things for people.
Yep.
So like those tailgates are like perfect for my parents, right? Because my dad gets to talk to people and then my mom gets to serve people. So they're both happy. And I'm so thankful to have them both and and to have them to put that on. I mean, it's just an incredible blessing, and I appreciate that you got a chance to speak with my dad, and I hope he behaved himself. He's listening right now, so if he didn't, you let me know, Daniel, and I'm gonna give him a call and have some words with him. But yeah, I appreciate that.
That's fantastic. Michael S., thank you for the super chat, Michael. Tennessee's defense looked very slow and conventional. Your thoughts?
They look confused, but they're also, I mean, they just didn't play.
Confusion makes you slow.
You and I talked about this. They did not play well. I mean, they looked, no team looked more overwhelmed by the moment than Tennessee. Like their defensive line didn't attack. Their linebackers looked lost and confused. Ohio State wasn't like doing things that are necessarily really outside of what they've done on film in the past. They look different than what they did against Michigan, but like this is the Michigan game was an anomaly. Like they were trying to run the ball down the middle and they weren't running the ball. So weird. But Ohio State's a faster team. Guys, I keep telling you, I've said this before. 2 of the 3 best defenses in college football, 2 of the 3 fastest defenses in college football are in the North. And that's been true all year. It's Ohio State and Notre Dame. That's been true all year. So, but they were completely overwhelmed by the moment, and they looked confused and looked lost, and that's exactly where they looked slow and conventional. I mean, you're spot on. And the part of their defense that I thought was so good, the front 7 just looked very mediocre, very average. And I'm like, the secondary I thought could have some trouble. That's why I thought Ohio State was going to win. I thought they'd hit a few big plays because I didn't think they could cover those receivers for a whole game. But everything they did in the first quarter, Vince, is what I thought Ohio State would do over the course of the game.
Right.
I knew Jeremiah was going to hit a couple, and Mecca was going to make some big plays, like that backside seam. That's a great ball, but it's like my dad was like, is that how they were supposed to play that defense? I said, I don't think that's what they meant to do. You know what I mean? Just like they were just lost in coverage. But yeah, I mean, Michael S., I absolutely think they looked slow. They looked, I don't know if I'd say conventional is the right word, because I think there's a convention. I think conventional defenses that are really good. I think Texas is kind of a conventional defense. They're pretty good.
Yeah.
They just looked unprepared and not coached well. You know, I mean, there's a big difference in the way Tim Banks prepared his defense and the way Al Golden prepared his defense. A couple, Broyles Award finalists looked a whole lot different in the first round. Just saying. But also huge kudos to Chip Kelly and the offensive staff for getting that offensive team ready to play for Ohio State, because they came out fired up and they were aggressive early in that game, Vince. Very aggressive. Very aggressive.
Just Your Ordinary Joe, thank you for the super chat. This is for Vince's ticket on the Petty train with his epic closing of the post-game show. Wishing IU a great basketball season. Go Irish. It was about 3:30 in the morning, and sometimes when it gets to be that late, I don't know what's coming out.
Your filter gets removed.
It does. It really does.
You've seen the real Vince comes out. I love it
before, and it is what it is. And it just kind of just flowed out at the end there as I was doing the closing. So
I loved it, Vince. Every minute of it.
All my friends that are IU fans, I love all of you, and I hope you do enjoy basketball season. We're going to continue talking about football.
I hope you enjoyed your one trip to the playoff.
Yeah. Sometimes it's just too easy. All right, Chris Hayen, thank you so much for the super chat. Appreciate you very much. Angela gets the big AT for the show, assisted T, so we all get to enjoy the coverage. Love the whole IB team. Thanks, Chris. Appreciate it very much.
I mean, Chris is kind of hitting on something, Vince. It's like, yes, we're the face of it, right? we're on here all the time, but
Sure.
we have families to support us.
No doubt.
You know what I mean? And your wife, let's be honest, your family had to have some serious discussions about whether or not you could not do other jobs that were paying you to come help me out.
This is true.
Where you weren't going to get paid right away. You bet on yourself and you bet on me.
Yeah.
That this is going to pay off eventually, and it has. But that's a family decision of a father of 5 young kids at the time, because Dylan was, he's a little man now, but he was barely a teenager when we first started kind of going down this road. And, my wife is incredibly supportive. Also is my photographer, which is pretty cool. She's got a bunch of photos from the game. If you watch the TV version where they show the Jaden Thomas touchdown reception from behind, she's the camera person right there to the right, shooting them. But same thing with Trevor. He's got a wife that's super supportive. Ryan's wife was that way as well. Being a dad and a husband and doing things that we do. Sean Davis's wife also, Sean Stiers. I mean, so whether it's wives, kids, parents, in my case, it's we're very blessed, but we're the face of this all, but we all have spouses that do a lot. And, my wife does a lot more than Spring Tea. She also created the message board, built the message board that we use as well. So,
right.
And she's part of that IB team.
She designed the logo.
I can tell you that. She also designed that logo. And
didn't she come up with the name too?
She did.
Yeah.
Because we were trying to figure out what we're going to name the podcast.
And
she came up with Irish Breakdown. And I was like, oh, that's like perfect for what we're going to do.
No doubt.
So,
yeah. No, it's great. We did a lot of shopping today, and my 12-year-old is wrapping everything right now. That's who came into the room a little bit ago just to confirm a few things. It's like, hey, man, you do you. This is great.
Is that the one that does the ad reads too?
Yes.
Okay. I couldn't remember how old she was. So I was like, okay.
Yep.
Because the other 2 are teenagers now, right?
Yeah, they're 15.
Oh, my goodness.
They're 15.
I keep telling you, we need to go to the range, man. We need to get proficient.
Yeah, there's some kid that keeps calling. I'm not a fan of that.
We'll talk
situation.
About it after the show.
I'd Benami, thank you so much for the super chat. Real MVP Friday. Riley Leonard's legs. How many drives did he save?
I mean, Iden, we talked about that during the show.
Yeah.
I mean, like in Iden's comment came, Vince, at 8:30. So we were not quite there yet. So,
gotcha.
Or I think he had just joined the show and he wasn't caught up yet.
Gotcha.
But we talked about it. I mean, there's so many like those hit. When people use the word hidden yards, that's what they're talking about. Where you dump the ball off to Jadarian Price, you gain 4 yards. But what you don't realize is that's really sort of a sometimes like a 10-yard net gain, because you might have lost 6 or more,
right? And
you gained 4. There was a lot of those hidden yards because of the job, right? I mean, there's things he needed to read better. He needed to maybe take a couple more shots down the field, but that was so. And that's where I think the impact of Riley Leonard gets lost on so many people that analyze Notre Dame. Is
right.
You're just looking at the raw numbers. And you're not realizing that, okay, this guy threw for 275 yards, but he had minus 40 yards in sacks. Riley only threw for 201, but he rushed for 30 and saved you 40 yards and not losing yards. So, I mean,
exactly.
The impact is similar, and that's what Riley brings to the table. And, that's why when he is reading the defense well and is throwing the ball accurately and getting where he needs to go, this offense is unstoppable. But even in a game where he's not doing that, they're still really good because of those type of plays.
Yeah,
spot on right there.
And like I said, not only were his legs great, but his checkdowns, like he was going through his reads, he was doing everything that he needed to do, and because of his mobility, he was able to hit some of those checkdowns for some of those positive plays and moving the chains, making it third and manageable, third and shorts, things of that nature. So he has. We've talked about it, and so I don't want to rehash the whole thing, but he is super comfortable in this offense right now. And then his athletic ability is added on to the top of that. But he is super comfortable right now. Him and Denbrock are firing on the same page right now. And it's very clear. There was a point, I remember I was watching the all 22, and I love the end zone view, right? And after a play, I can't even remember what the situation was, but I just remember, they completed a short pass or whatever. He immediately looks to the sideline and I know he's talking to Denbrock, because he's given some hand motions about what play he wants next. You know what I mean? So like the combination of those two is so clear because as soon as that whistle blew, he was looking over to Denbrock and he was calling for another play. And so I just think that you could just tell that they're on the same page.
Yep. A couple things here real quick from Full Life. This is not a super chat, but a question I did want to address. He says, does your photographer ever sell any photos from the game? So we're not allowed to sell those photos. Any photos we take are only for editorial purposes only. So using on shows, using on, cards, using on articles, using on, social media promotions, things like that. We're not allowed to sell them for profit, which I'm fine with. I mean, it is what it is. I think it'd be cool if we could, but we can't. And I'm not like, it's one of those things where I wish we could do it. I think we should be allowed to do it to a degree, but it's not something that I feel strongly about that I'm like never going to complain about it. It's been the rule. I knew it was the rule coming in. It's all good. Like, cause you can kind of, it's a magazine cover and sell the magazine, but you can't sell it individually, for profit, which is, that's fine. It is what it is. So, and I mean, that's also to a degree also protects Notre Dame a little bit. I mean, you have some photo that you could then go, that maybe's not the, there's just things that could happen where it's like, okay, it's just best to not allow that to happen at all.
Irish for Life, thank you so much for the super chat. Just want to say thanks for the IB tailgate. It was awesome. Vince, you were right. 5 decades of ND home games and IU fans were the worst.
Yeah.
I'm just look. That was a classic case of they have no idea what to do. Like what do I do with my hands? Like it was like
I don't know what to do with my hands.
Yeah, right? like they didn't. They had no idea how to respond or react for being in that position. Like that was. I
was watching the game. I was going back watching so I had the broadcast on. I was working on an article earlier today. And I was looked over when Riley learned that pick, and these two guys like hugged each other. They're like hugging each other. Like, you guys have no clue how to celebrate a big play. Not the manly high five. Like, oh, I'm so happy about the interception.
Oh, now I got to watch it. Okay.
Yeah. Fair enough. Oh, my gosh. You guys don't know what to do.
That is really funny. That is really funny.
Yeah, but thank you for that, my man. It was good to see you at the tailgate too, Paul. So appreciate you, man, very, very much. But I still say Ohio State fans are still kind of the worst, but I guess I had such a harsh feeling on it. Like, you don't deserve the right to be this way as a fan.
Yeah.
IU,
like I almost like after the fact now, like we are now removed from it. We don't really have to listen to them anymore, probably for a while. But I almost give them a little bit of a pass because they really had no idea how to react. Like, Ohio State fans have been in the limelight. They should know how to act.
The moment. That's what you do as a fan. And you know what, man? Absolutely. I don't know what's going to happen right now.
Yes.
I'm just happy to be here. I'm going to enjoy this team. Right. And I'm not going to go run my mouth about how this team's overrated and this team didn't play anybody. And
just enjoy it. Enjoy the run, man. Yeah, like that's how I'm enjoying this run right now.
Yeah.
That's as a lifelong Notre Dame fan, I'm enjoying the run. I'm not going to get nasty to Georgia fans when I see them down there. Like, that's not
the heck out of Georgia's program.
100%.
If I was their fans, I'd think that they were going to beat Notre Dame too, because that's what they've done. They've never they beat Notre Dame. So
100%.
They have the right to say that. I don't think Notre Dame can beat us. What makes you say that? They never have.
Right. Now after the game. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, like, look, Bama fans can talk about Notre Dame. Georgia fans can talk about Notre Dame because they've beat Notre Dame. I don't want to hear jack from Tennessee fans. I don't want to hear jack from Ole Miss fans. I don't want to hear jack from LSU. Especially don't hear anything from LSU fans.
Right.
Because Notre Dame's beat you the last 2 times you've played. And the head coach you hired from us has been worse at your school than he was at Notre Dame the last 3 years. Mm-hmm. But Bama fans and Georgia fans have earned the right to talk trash about Notre Dame.
Yeah. That's why it's just kind of,
right.
Just kind of take it.
And until you do something about it, they're going to keep doing it. And,
that's fine.
Okay.
I'm okay with that. To be honest, I'm okay with that. Like it is what it is, but I'm glad.
Bama fans on Twitter turning into a bunch of crybabies that we didn't get into the playoff with 3. Like, listen, first of all, y'all should not have won as many titles as you did because Oklahoma State should have been in the freaking. There's somebody put a tweet out the other day, which I thought was awesome. Bama fans talking about strength of schedule. Go back to 2011 and look at Oklahoma State had a higher strength of schedule than Bama. Because remember, that's back when the Big 12 was really good. Texas and Oklahoma and all those teams. They had more wins over top 25 teams. Like, their whole resume was better than Bama's. But Bama had the better loss. That was all they had. And they got to play LSU, who beat them already in the championship game. Oklahoma State's the team that should have. So y'all have been blessed with opportunities you didn't deserve. 2017, you didn't even play for the SEC championship and still made the college football playoff and won it. So I don't want to hear you crybabies talking about what you deserved and didn't deserve. If anybody should be saying Bama doesn't deserve in the playoff, it should be Bama fans, because you know the standard that your program set for college football the last 15 years.
Right.
You know what it is.
Yeah.
You know what a championship football team looks like. You've seen a bunch of them the last 15 years. So now you're crying about a 9-3 team that got destroyed by Oklahoma to make the playoff. It's a bad look. In your 80s out there, we need more money. We need more money. Now that everyone can pay players and it's not just us and other SEC teams, we don't like this. We need more money. Stop crying. Don't lose to Oklahoma and Vanderbilt. You think you got more NIL money than Vanderbilt? Vince and I have more NIL money than Vanderbilt. And they beat you. Stop crying.
Ronnie Reeves, thanks for the super chat. Brian, how will the RPO slant pass play out differently? Are you saying it will be a matter of ND shading the receivers differently against Georgia?
Well, it's not just that. It's about playing it overall differently. I mean, it's about how do you play your safeties? Are you going to have your nickel covering those guys? Or are you going to have your safeties covering those guys? They were bringing linebacker pressure, so they were kind of leaving that inside zone open a little bit and letting them catch them and then just round the ball and bring them down.
They sit underneath that.
Yeah, and a lot of those plays were happening after Notre Dame got a big lead. So, like, they were kind of giving up a little inside slant, and they would just rally to the ball, catch it, tackle it, and then just, make them run another play. So it was just like we're earlier in the game, they were bracketing those a little bit more. Linebackers jumping underneath or the safety coming down. You think of the interception. There was like literally two guys covering it, one in front, one behind, and one trailing. Or one in front, one trailing, one behind. They just played it differently. And there's going to be times that Georgia may catch Notre Dame in a blitz where they're giving up inside alignment. Because the other thing, too, is if you're playing it that way, okay, do I want to give up a glance route where if I read it correctly, I can maybe drive on the ball and break it up? Or do I want to give that inside leverage where they can maybe then hit me with a slot fade? Which one am I greater risk of? So sometimes you got to make those decisions. And a couple of them, they didn't play it real well. They were late reacting to the glance route. But, there's other things you'll do. Drop a linebacker underneath it, roll a safety down, show outside leverage and then jump it. But Al Golden said after the game, like, look, I just wasn't going to show a whole lot at that point in time. The game was over, essentially, and that's kind of where it's at. Get to the next one.
All good.
Do you have anything to add to that, Vince? Or?
No. I mean, that's what you take chances when you're a defensive coordinator. You take chances when you want to fire linebackers, right? I mean, that's and Al Golden's willing to take that chance because more often than not, it worked. You know what I mean? And it wasn't a case where those plays were killing you. I mean, it's where they had the most success, obviously, in the passing game. But you take those chances, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. More times it worked.
Yep.
Tyler Evans, thanks for the super chat. I never thought Joel Klatt would burn Lane Kiffin, and Lane Kiffin was quiet after that Tennessee beatdown.
Real quiet. I mean, has he even tweeted since then?
Actually, I'm going to go look. Probably not.
I'm look because I don't follow him on Twitter. Everybody loves to retweet him because he's such a good follow. And I'm like, maybe he should focus more on like not losing to teams that suck. Yeah, he retweeted to some kid that looks like they, I don't know, committed to him. I don't know. Has he had like an original tweet? And tweeted out some. Is that a restaurant menu? I don't know. Tweeted out a tweet of his daughter. I guess I don't know. Well, that's weird. Yeah, and then other than that, he hasn't tweeted anything since before the game last night. So he hasn't actually put out his own thoughts since before the game yesterday. So yeah, he's been real quiet. Real quiet.
Yeah, my favorite thing is he retweeted a comment from Paul Feinbaum about how the College Football Selection Committee has given us some real blockbusters. Take a bow, and that was at 2:17 p.m. yesterday before the Tennessee game. By the way,
yeah, 100%.
That's great.
Yeah.
Siggy13, thank you very much for the super chat. Wanted to hear your guys' thoughts on Golden's post-game comments about not showing more pressures at the end to stop IU since the game was in hand.
So this is what he said. I'm going to read it verbatim so we know the context. He was asked, we know you're a 60-minute type of guy. Every yard matters. What happened there at the end? How much do you take away from that? And he says, I don't. We had the game in control the whole time, so I'm not worried about the end of the game. There's things that we can learn from it. Obviously, we've got to finish better, and I've got to make some calls there. But at that point, I just didn't think continuing to show elaborate pressures in that situation was to our benefit, to be quite honest with you. I could have called a better game at the end there for the guys and helped them out. So some people have taken that as he didn't want to show things to Georgia. Guys, by the end of the fourth quarter, he's already made all the calls that Georgia's going to evaluate and care about.
Correct.
If he would have called some blitz at that moment, Georgia's not going to be like, oh, that's the one we got. It would have been the same stuff he called. He just stopped calling what he'd been calling.
Right.
And that's really what he meant. It's like, we had the game in line. We had the game won. We're just going to call our base defense and just make them go down the field and
take time off the clock.
Yeah.
Time was the biggest enemy to IU.
All year. I mean, he's been doing it all year. It's just kind of what
consistent.
He does.
He's consistent.
Yeah. But that's what he meant. He didn't mean like we're not going to show them anything. I mean, guys, we're 55 minutes into the game. He's shown Georgia everything that and we're in game 13. Like,
right.
There's not going to be surprises of like some exotic pressure that they've never seen. It's just which of the stuff we do we think is going to work best? When do we call it? Against what protections? What tendencies do we think we can find from Georgia? Just like Georgia's going to – there's nothing Georgia's going to do defensively that Notre Dame hasn't seen. That's not how game planning works.
Right.
I mean, you can call like a play here, a play there, like some reverse double pass thing. But by and large, it's about more so, okay, do we know when they like to do it? How are they going to react to it? And then can we make calls that maybe go at it? Right. And that's really what it boils down to when you're this deep into the season and you have the kind of coaching staffs that are left. Because for the most part, the teams that are in the playoff have very good coaching staffs. And whether that's coordinators, head coaches, position coaches, whatever. And it's just about finding, I know what they do. They know what we do, but you don't know when we're going to do it or how we're going to do it, what formation we're going to do it out of. That's the chess match. It's not we're going to invent 57 new pressures every week and then throw those out the next week and invent 25 more. That's more of what he meant from that comment. It just stopped calling what they had been doing.
Yep.
And my thing is, if you're going to do that, put your backups in and let them kind of play.
Right.
And then keep calling it with those guys in the game. But I don't know why you'd leave your starting defense in there and just not keep running your defense. But I guess he said it. I mean, he answered. It's annoying because I want to have Notre Dame be the number one ranked scoring defense in the country, but he doesn't care about that. He cares about these right here, right?
Yeah,
so
and at
Brian
the end
Kelly
of the day,
cares about that. Al Golden cares about that. Get those W's.
You're like my co-pilot on the petty train.
Just trying, man.
Enjoy.
I just have been listening to this nonsense from ESPN all week. It's just driving me nuts.
Michael S., thank you for the super chat. How does Notre Dame current defense compare to last year's Michigan defense?
Oh, boy. Very different. I mean, that was a team that was big and physical and aggressive, and their defensive tackles were big monsters. I mean, I think Mason Graham was the smallest one of all of them, right? And, because Kenneth Grant is like 350, right? Chris Jenkins, I believe, was a bigger guy. I mean, well, maybe he's not now. He's 320, but like Mason Graham is 6'3", 320. Kenneth Grant's, I think, 340, 350. Chris Jenkins was 311. He was their other interior guy last year. They're a big, stout, physical, power defense that bases off of an odd front. Notre Dame is more based off of a 4-down, 4-2-5. Coverage structures are very different. Notre Dame plays way more man coverage. Michigan didn't blitz quite as much as Notre Dame does, and the blitzes they would bring would be a little bit different. They're more about keep everything in front of you type of defense. That's why Michigan wasn't a big sack team last year. They weren't like a big sack TFL team last year, Vince. Because they're just be physical, dominated the attack, things like that, and not so much a super disruptive team. I mean, last year, when you look at sacks, Michigan ranked 11th in the country in total sacks because they played 15 games. They ranked 28th in sacks per game. So they weren't like this huge, crazy, exotic, pressure team. They could do it when they needed to. When you look at tackles for loss last season, Vince, again, Michigan was they were 34th in the country in total tackles for loss. They were 76 in the country in tackles for loss per game. But I'd be willing to bet you that not many teams in the country had more minus like 3 yards or less. Had more plays where they held teams at 3 yards or less number of plays than Michigan did. Because some of those teams are like they got a bunch of tackles for loss, but those teams are also getting gashed because they're aggressive and they're exotic. And yeah, it worked for these 8-9 plays, but then these other 4 or 5 plays they cut back or they caught us in a blitz and we ripped them for a 40-yard gain. Michigan's just like, dude, we're just going to just pound you into oblivion, and just different coverage structures. There's not a whole lot similar outside of the results between the two, in my opinion, Vince. They were both outstanding defenses. They just did it very differently. I think Notre Dame has a better back seven, especially safety and corner overall. Michigan had a better D-line. Their D-line last year as a whole was really freaking good last season. That's how I'd compare. Yeah. All right. So can you hear me, Vince?
I can.
Because I just heard some talking in the background.
Oh, it's my kids. They're getting feisty. All right. Beezer 12 Washington Beer. Thanks for the super chat for the censor.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I'm sorry for I just got fired up. I try to pride myself on not cussing when I get fired up, but
it surprised me.
Got a little bit mad.
But hey, it is what it is, man.
I do apapologize.
It's called passion, Brian.
Yeah, but you know what? You can be passionate and you can be fired up and you can still speak in a way that, if my 12-year-old niece or your 12-year-old daughter was listening, would I say something that I would find appropriate for them to listen to? And that was not. That is fair. And so I do apologize for that, because I know that for a fact that there's parents that drive to school and they've got their kids in the car listening to the show. And I wouldn't, if I'm going to listen to the show, I don't want to hear them using those words and things like that. So I do genuinely apologize for that. That's not who we are here. And so I violated one of my own rules. And so I do apologize for that. I appreciate the super chat. But for all you parents out there, won't happen again. I am sorry for that. We're better than that. We're better than that.
The Hook, thank you for the super chat. The biggest impact on strength of schedule is preseason rankings. I think it's also the conference that you belong to. That doesn't hurt.
Which is a lot about preseason rankings, and that's a big problem with. I talked about this last week, Vince. Like the top 10 teams in strength of schedule are all Big Ten or SEC teams. Some years that might be legitimate. This year it was not, and it's even less legitimate when you think about the fact that these teams don't really play each other a whole lot, because you created these super conferences where, like it used to be prior to this year, you knew Bama was going to have a crazy strength of schedule because they were going to play the entire SEC West, which was almost always has at least 2 really good teams in it, sometimes 4. And they were always going to play Tennessee, who, for a long time was always pretty good. And then they'd play some non-conference on a neutral field against a good team. So you knew they were going to have a legitimately good schedule. So you'd give them a little benefit of doubt. That's not necessarily true this year. And because you don't play, it used to be the East that would have that. It used to be like, because where Florida was always great and Georgia was always really good and Tennessee was always really good. And then the East was always going to be, you'd always going to have to play a tough schedule, because if you were Florida, you always got to play Georgia and Tennessee, and that was always going to be a battle. And if you were Georgia, you were always going to play Tennessee, you're always going to play Florida, and that was always going to be a battle. And then Georgia would always play somebody really good in non-conference. Remember back in the day when Boise was really rolling, Georgia was one of the few teams outside of like Oregon and Washington that was willing to play Boise in their heyday. And, so they've always been a team willing to do that. But now you're not guaranteeing that because of these 16 to 18 team conferences. You're not guaranteeing that these teams are going to play tough schedules all the time. And so they don't play each other as much, which makes it harder to evaluate strength of schedule the way that you used to. And that has to be accepted and recognized and taken somehow into consideration when looking at these strength of schedules. Because some of the teams I see with like top high-ranked strength of schedules in the SEC, I'm like, that team did not play a gauntlet of a schedule. They played 2 really good teams and then nothing after that. And that's like Georgia played a monster of a schedule this year, just a monster of a schedule this year. But you know what Georgia did that Alabama and Ole Miss didn't do? They didn't lose to teams that suck.
Yeah, exactly.
And if you'd have not lost the teams that suck, you'd be in a call. Like if Bama would have lost to Georgia, but beat Vanderbilt and also still Tennessee, but beat Vanderbilt and beat Oklahoma, they'd be in the college football.
They're in. And there's nobody complaining about them being in either. Yeah.
No.
They had it all in their hands in November. That's the thing. You know, we talked about teams having their destiny in their own hands. Alabama's destiny was in their own hands. And they messed up. And that's why they're out. I mean, it is what it is.
Yeah, this is what I'm talking about right here, Vince, from 44T. Thank you, Brian. My 10-year-old daughter is with me listening. She loves ND. And that's why what I said was not appropriate, because I know this. I know this.
Right.
And again, I have no problem with his 10-year-old daughter listening to me rant and go off on the SEC and ESPN. There's nothing wrong with that. It's fun. It's passionate. But when you cross the line with those type of things, like that's just like if you're of a parent want to say whatever you want around your child, that's your business. But it shouldn't be me that's introducing certain words into the dialogue. And that's what I apologize for. I really do. So 44T, you're sitting there listening with your daughter. Darling, I am so sorry. That is not a good way to express yourself. And I promise you won't hear that type of thing again.
Milton.
Did I already pull that one up? Okay. No.
No, I don't think so. Andy Milton fan, thanks for the super chat. 2 more rant minutes. $1 a minute, apparently.
I think I gave a couple more here. So
yeah. It's all, I think you've fulfilled that one.
I had a pretty long rant, but yeah.
It's all good.
Yeah.
Bronx ND fan, thanks for the super chat. Did the Notre Dame receivers get open against IU secondary and Riley Leonard miss them, or was it more about the game plan? Have our wide receivers improved?
You know, Vince, that's one thing we kind of mentioned. I think the receivers got open a little bit more than I thought watching live, but not a ton. It's just a few times that they did get open, he wasn't seeing it and wasn't getting the ball out there to him as much as he should have.
Yeah.
And so, but no, the receivers didn't play great. They were a little better than I thought they were live, but they didn't play great.
And there was also like IU secondary, the way IU was playing, they were trying to take away the passing game from the wide receivers, the deep stuff. Yeah.
Notre Dame had some stuff built in to take some shots down the field against what they expected to be a more aggressive aggressive defense.
And they didn't get
but
that.
It wasn't. But they also built in some things that allowed them to get the ball out if they did get underneath it. And that's part of what goes into a good game plan.
Yeah.
It's I'm reading the post corner. If it's not there, come down, check it, or run.
Yeah.
And that's what they didn't do. But like, no, the receivers still didn't play with enough urgency. Their top ends are still too choppy and things like that. But there was also a few more moments. Like Jordan Faison still has to close off. Once he gets outside, you got to lean back in and try to close that guy off. He's got a shot to catch that go route. I mean, his whole game is different if he runs that route better. Overall, I thought Jordan did a pretty good job route running. He struggles. He needs to learn to do a better job on closing off DBs on go routes, because he's done that multiple times where he'll get outside and just stay outside and then let that guy get up to him. He's got to learn. That's one thing he's got to learn. But his post route that he got open on that big post at the end was a great route. Guy was playing outside leverage, Vince. He attacked him outside. Because like the reason attacking leverage is so important is because if I'm playing you a certain way, inside outside leverage, I'm playing you that way because I'm trying to take that away with my leverage. So I'm trying to force you to go outside. So if I'm playing outside, I want to funnel you back. I want to funnel you inside because that's where my help is, right? And so on that particular play, the corner's playing the post. So he's playing off and outside because anything that's going to break in on short to intermediate, he has help. And then if the DB goes on if the receiver goes on a post route, then he just plays the post, right? Well, what Jordan did was he leaned him outside with his stem. And then when he got to the top end, Vince, I know you saw this, but he nodded him outside, leaned him outside, and then stuck it, and then beat him on the post, and the guy was done.
I mean, he did it. The guy did a 360,
and he actually recovered pretty well.
Yeah,
but once Jordan had a step on him, like you weren't going to get to the ball. The only hope you had is that you could maybe catch him before the end zone, and he did. But that was a great route, and some of the best routes we saw were from him and Greathouse. The younger guys, I think, run better routes because, and part of that is because the challenge Mike Brown had is he had 4 veteran players that were taught something very different from what he taught for years, right? With Bo Collins and Jaden Harrison and Jaden Thomas and Chris Mitchell. Now, they're all coachable kids, but there's a lot of deprogramming that has to go into 4 or 5 years of what you've been taught to do something differently. Whereas Jaden Greathouse and Jordan Faison only had 1 year of that, really. And so they've been able to adjust a little bit better, which is why I think you're seeing them, run routes more effectively, which is why they tend to get more separation, which is why we say, again, they need to be targeted a little bit more. So I think that's a challenge that Mike Brown has faced this year, and he's just going to have to keep doing a better job to make sure that they're getting – just play with more urgency. Urgency is about speed, tempo. Urgency is about understanding leverage and why leverage matters and why you attack leverage and things like that. Like, here's an easy coaching point for me. Base rule is like there's certain things that my guys had to do unless I told them otherwise. Inside foot up, whatever, attack leverage, and your aiming point's the outside shoulder. So if he's inside of me, I'm attacking inside, but my aiming point is his outside. So my inside shoulder is going to his outside shoulder. If he's outside of me, I'm trying to attack his outside shoulder to widen him out and then get where I want to get to. If he's inside of me, I want to attack his outside. I want to get him to freeze so I can then beat him outside or then double move him and then beat him inside that way. Those are all parts of it, and that's why. But when a guy's inside of me, like on Bo Collins' in cut on the third down he dropped Vince, guy was playing him inside and Bo just stayed outside of him.
Yeah.
Never threatened his leverage. And so that made it easier for the guy to get hands on Bo when he tried to go inside. And so that's why those things are get up and in. So how I taught that route is get up and in on him. So get up and then you're even with him and then you can get vertical. And now I kind of got him in a 3-way go. I go here, I go here, I go here. But Bo stayed outside and made it easy for the DB to say, okay, if you try to come inside, I'm going to be all over you. And he was. He never threatened what he was trying to protect. And that's kind of just things that this receiving core hasn't really done a great job of for a chunk of the year. And they're that's kind of what we want to see more of. Don't read the name.
I was just going to say, could you feel the hesitation there?
Yeah.
Thanks for the super chat, though, ADN. In your opinion, how much does the hiring of Lando play a part in the increased speed of this Notre Dame team?
I mean, to a degree, it does. I mean, Lando's not taking 4.7 guys and turn them into 4.4s, right? The biggest thing that factors into this is recruiting. The biggest reason Notre Dame is increasing speed is because of Marcus Freeman and Chad Bowden and Mike Mickens recruiting better, faster players. Leonard Moore was always fast. We talked about this on film. I remember breaking him down, like, because he's so long and they play a lot of off coverage, you couldn't really see his speed at corner. He just kind of toyed with guys. So then I remember breaking. It's like, now watch him on his kick return. Watch him a receiver. And that's when you could really see this kid can fly. And so it's like there was a question posed on the message board today. And the question was, do you think that it's something along these lines? Do you think that Notre Dame is how have they been able to put this backfield together with so many, plan B guys or guys that weren't maybe highly ranked guys, et cetera, et cetera? And, are they just great at development? I was like, respectfully, I disagree with your entire premise because I think you're assuming a lot about this backfield that's not true. That's how it used to be. You find these hidden gems and you coach them up. But Jeremiah Love was a top 100 national recruit that I ranked as a top 50 overall player, and he's proven to be so. Jadarian Price was a consensus 4-star recruit that I graded as a top 100 player, and he's proven to be so. Keedron Young was a top 100 recruit by me and other recruiting services and was a consensus 4-star recruit. Aeneas Williams was a consensus 4-star recruit that I think 2 recruiting services ranked in the top 150, and I had as a top 150 guy. These are not plan B, developmental project guys, none of these guys were hidden gems.
Yeah.
They all had impressive offer lists. These are top level recruits that Dylan McCullough and before him, Lance Taylor, because Lance Taylor is the one that initially recruited Jadarian Price. Since then, it's been all Coach McCullough. If I would say, hey, that's the guy we want, and then they went out and got him. Jeremiah Love was one of the best running backs in the country. He had $1 million offers from SEC schools in Oregon. It's just he cared about things just beyond the financial part of it, right? And Jadarian Price is a big-time, highly productive player out of Texas, was a consensus 4-star recruit. And so I think 2 of the recruiting services, Vince, had Jadarian as a top 250 recruit, which I still felt was too low. I still felt it was too low. But let me go look at his recruiting ranking. Yeah, 247 had him at number 166, ESPN had him at number 227, and Rivals had him at number 244. So now I'd say that's low. That's too low. I had him as a top 100 guy, but that's still a top 250 running back. Keedron Young, I believe on 3 had him as a top 100 player. Let's go here. Keedron Young. Let's look at his recruiting profile coming out of high school. He was ranked as a top number 79 overall player in the country by On 3. Was ranked number 111 by 247. Was ranked number 127 by ESPN, and everyone had him as a 4-star player. Aeneas Williams, as I said, another guy, and I had him as a top 100 player also. Aeneas Williams was a consensus 4-star recruit that Rivals ranked as the number 150 player in the country, and I ranked him as a top 150 caliber player. So these guys are, and that's your lowest ranked guy, in my opinion, was Aeneas, who was top 150. Everybody else had as top 100 or top 50 is Jeremiah. I think what you're seeing is they identified very talented players, went out and recruited and landed very talented players. I don't think this is a hidden gem thing like what Mike Mickens has done a little bit at corner with the Benjamin Morrisons and the Leonard Moores. Now, they were high-level talents that maybe were under-recruited. These guys at running back were not. You had to beat some dudes to get some of these kids. And so I think this is a very talented running back room, a very fast. Jeremiah Love was, they were talking about in the broadcast, he was a state champ in the 100-meter dash in Missouri. Leonard Moore, a fast kid out of Texas coming in. Christian Gray ran a 4.41 and a 4.42 at the Ohio State camp before his senior year, right? Like, they recruited fast players and they play fast. And it's his job to make sure that they have endurance, they have power, they have agility, they have the ability to play over a period of time, a lot of snaps, and then to maximize the speed that they already have. But he's not turning 4.7 guys into 4.4 guys. He may take a low 4.5 guy and turn him into a high to mid 4.4 guy. That's part of the strength program because now you're maximizing his speed. But it really comes down to it's recruiting. It's what Coach Freeman's doing. It's what Chad Bowden's doing. It's what those guys are doing, bringing in better level of player, right? And, you want to get faster at linebacker? Recruit Drake Bowen. Recruit Jayden Alsbury. Recruit Jalen Sneed. Recruit Kingston Villiamasa. Recruit Madden Faremo. Recruit Anthony Sacker. Recruit Bodie Cahoon. Recruit Teddy Rizak. Those guys can all run. And that's really what it comes down to, right? And Aeneas is a kid who had 4,000 career rushing yards and over 2,000 career receiving yards in high school. Like, he was a dude, and he's your 4th highest ranked guy of those 5. Jabron Payne was the only sort of plan B type of guy. But that would not have been the case if Jabron didn't have 2 bad injuries in his last years of high school. Jabron was a borderline top 100 player as a sophomore before he had the knee injury. Devin Ford was the top 100 recruit coming out of high school, Vince.
That's true.
When he went to Penn State. So these are not hidden gem type guys. These are high-level player type guys.
Bronx ND
this is
fan.
the last one, Vince, by the way.
Okay, thanks for the super chat. How far away are we from seeing Sevillano, Mookum, Houston contribute some more? Remind me what happened to Vernon. Our D-line depth is thin.
I don't agree with that premise. Number one, nothing happened to them. Those guys are all either freshmen or redshirt freshmen.
Right.
And on a defensive line where they're playing behind much more veteran players. Notre Dame, even with all the injuries, even when Riley Mills went down, they were rotating 8 guys the entire time on the D-line.
Right.
You're talking about Mills, Cross, Rubio, and Heinisch inside. It's a strong 4-man rotation. You're talking about playing Tuihalamaka, Burnham, Oben, and Bryce Young at end, at the 2 end spots, end at Viper. You were playing 8 guys regularly, and then when one of them got hurt, then at the end of the game, they're playing Logan Thomas at the end of the game,
right?
Who came in and got a sack at the end of the game. So I don't think that the depth in there is thin at all. If you lose Riley, okay, now you're where most teams are, where you've got to go with a 3-man. Most teams don't have the ability to go with a 4-man rotation the way Notre Dame does. So I don't necessarily accept the premise. Now, if Riley's out and Howard Cross is limited, then now you're in some trouble, and those guys have to play. But those guys are all going to get a chance to compete in the spring for a role next year.
Right.
When Riley's gone and Howard's gone.
They're the next wave.
Right.
They're not going to be counted on necessarily this year.
Right.
Unless there's injuries. Yeah, agreed.
And Bryce Young's the only young guy playing because he was a freak. He was a top 50 national recruit coming out of high school. He's just a different cat.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, the other young guys like Junior and Josh Burnham, they're redshirt sophomores, which means they're third-year players. Donovan Heiss is a redshirt sophomore, means he's a third-year player. Those are the young guys in the rotation outside of Bryce. So it's just nothing's happened to them. They're behind really good players.
Right.
And if they stick around, they'll get their chances in the spring to go out there and compete.
Correct.
And that's going to be the key. So that's going to do it, Vince.
All right. That's going to do it for this evening's Upon Further Review. Stay tuned because there's going to be a full week of, well, not a full week because there is Christmas, but there's going to be a full week of information on the boards. There's going to be shows, obviously. Brian, do you know what the schedule is for tomorrow just yet? I know there's going to be an IB Nation Sports Talk show at 5. Yeah. That's definitely going to happen.
Not sure yet.
Okay.
We're going to probably have a show tomorrow. I'm just not sure if it's going to be at 1. Now, we are back to when we do have afternoon shows. It will be back to 1 because all the construction stuff is done.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
But I don't know yet if we're going to go at 1 tomorrow, if we're going to have another night show. I haven't decided that yet. That's why you need to have the notification bell. And I'll tweet it out and I'll put it on the board and all that kind of stuff.
Yep. You got it. So hey.
Right now I'm leaning towards an 8 o'clock show.
Okay.
So because I want to do some film breakdowns tomorrow and
that's going to the boards, folks.
Yeah.
That's why you got to be a member at boards.irishbreakdown.com because there's going to be video breakdowns and all that good stuff going up. So make sure you stay tuned for that. I can tell you this, everybody that's listening, tomorrow at 5 o'clock, it is December 23rd. And if you know what December 23rd means, it is Festivus. It's Festivus for the rest of us. And we are going to have our Festivus show on IB Nation Sports Talk. So you're going to want to tune into there because I got a lot of grievances and they're coming out. All right.
So I kind of already apparently kicked that off.
Yeah, you did.
With I had a lot of grievances toward ESPN and some of these lazy talking heads who.
It's Festivus Eve.
Yeah.
I mean, that's, you're like the family that gets to open a gift, on Christmas Eve. It's Festivus Eve. We got to open the gift of a Brian rant. So there you go. The grievance has begun. So
one thing about the show, there will be no Christmas Day show this year.
Right. Okay.
I don't think we ever have, but
I don't think we ever have.
We are
either,
taking that day off. Yeah.
Right. Absolutely. So, tune in tomorrow, 5 o'clock for sure. But then you got to hit that notification bell. You got to be a member of the board if you want to know when Brian's show is going to go on. It's either going to be in the afternoon or the evening. So make sure you check it out. I know, feats of strength. Hey, you're just going to have to tune in. You're just going to have to tune in. That's all I got to say. But hey, everybody, thanks for hanging out with us for another edition of Upon Further Review. Hopefully we've got 3 more of those coming. And I'm looking forward to all 3 of them. So for Brian, I'm Vince. We will talk to you next time on the Irish Breakdown podcast. Have a wonderful evening, everyone, and we will see you for Festivus.